Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September the 5th regular meeting and public hearings for the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. Do we have anyone here to assist us with the invocation this evening? I don't see anyone noted. If not, Commissioner Brown, would you mind leading us?
Sure, I'd be glad to.
And we also have a group of scouts with us here this evening. They're from PAC 800, Den 5, and they are here working on their badges, or I guess their is it a badge or is it a tag, a loop for their government. So they're learning a little bit about how their county government works, and they're going to join us up at the podium, and they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand as you're able and bow your heads. Gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you here tonight to do the people's business. Give us moderation, temperance, and wisdom in your sight, Lord, that we would do all things worthy of the people's praise and respect, Lord. Help us to be good stewards of all the resources we're entrusted. Help us to be greater role models as citizens for all of those that we come in contact to you. Thank you for our wonderful community. Thank you for all of our employees that do such a wonderful job for this county. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. When you're ready, guys.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job. Thank you. You may be seated.
Good job.
All right, this is the point in the meeting where we look at our agenda and set our business for the evening. So you scouts can either stay or go, your choice. I think you'll probably be bored quickly.
And they're out.
I know. Woo, let's go.
Running to the back.
Lucky them.
So I'm going to do as I
Smart
normally
kid.
do and pull the commissioners for any changes they may have. I'll start with Commissioner Levent. Do you have any changes to the agenda for District 3 this evening?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to ask the consideration of the board to postpone old business number 2 to September 19th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone old business number 2. I'm stalling as I flip to the page, and the date on that postponement is until
September 19th.
September the 19th. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Do you have any other changes to the agenda, Commissioner Levent?
I do not thank you, though.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Cooper, do you have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Madam Chair, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills, I believe you may have some changes.
Ken, on old business number 3, it's written the items to be withdrawn. Is that correct?
It is. I would recommend a postponement till October 3rd.
So withdrawn's not correct?
No.
Okay. And you said September what?
October 3rd.
October 3rd.
Yes, ma'am.
A motion to postpone to October 3rd.
And that's old business
Second.
number 3?
Old business number 3.
Okay, thank you. We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0, and we will see that item postponed until October the 3rd. Any other changes for District 4? None?
No.
All right. Commissioner Brown, for District 2, I believe you may have a postponement as well.
Madam Chair, I have one. I'd like to request postponement, old business 1 until November 7th.
November the 7th. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote. That motion carries with a vote of 5-0 for postponement until November the 7th. Okey doke, that brings me to me, and I do have several different actions to request this evening. I have just to make a note, we're not actually postponing the hearing, but on public hearing number 4, we are going to hear the item tonight, but I want everybody to know we will be postponing decision on that as it catches up to a conditional use permit that's also in process. But I do have some actual postponements. Public hearing number 5, I would like to see that postponed until October the 3rd.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that item is now postponed until October the 3rd, and that is at the applicant's request. I also have a request for a postponement to old business number 5, also to October the 3rd.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second, please vote. And that is so that we can continue to work with the applicant to bring them more into compliance. I would like to make a motion to withdraw without prejudice at the applicant's request, old business number 4.
Second.
A motion and a second, please vote. And that will be withdrawn. It is a vote of 5-0 in support of that without prejudice. So it will not reappear until some future time if it's ever brought back up, for anybody who's tracking that. All right. Is Mr. Johnson with us, or who's here for the county manager's office? No changes there. Dave Gruen, are you aware of any? Okay. Counselor?
Madam Chair, I do have a few. First of all, I have passed out to your stations a resolution of condemnation involving a parcel that there is some considerable time sensitivity with. We need to get this done this evening. And so I would ask that the board move to add the resolution of condemnation with respect to parcel 57 on the new business agenda as item number 6.
Second. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to create new business number 6. Please vote. And that is on a time-sensitive basis. Well, it doesn't matter. It's an open session, right? So I guess it would be time-sensitive by nature. Any other changes?
And Madam Chair, just for the record, that is property of Roy and Janice Conley, for the record. And I will, of course, go over that when we get to that item. That is
Roy?
number 1. We've already changed to move old business 3 to October 3rd. That's fine. The only other thing I have with respect to the agenda, Madam Chair, is when you get to the consent agenda, and before y'all make a motion and second, if you would allow me to speak very quickly to the board once the motion is pending.
There's
to
some
adopt it.
clarifications, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We will do that. And that's all of your changes?
Yes, ma'am. That's it.
Tom Brown, anything from staff?
No.
Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say, or everybody please vote. The 2 rooms, we have to call it in there. And that motion carries to adopt the amended agenda with a vote of 5-0. All right. We do have a very important announcement this evening. Mr. Grimes, please come forward.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for a few minutes tonight. With us tonight is Dave Nadler. He is the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service at the Atlanta office, which is actually in Peachtree City, to recognize Forsyth County on renewal of our storm ready status. So I'm going to turn this announcement over to Mr. Nadler.
Good evening. Yes, as Chris said, Storm Ready, just want to talk a little bit about what Storm Ready is. It's a public safety initiative program that really focuses on verifying the county's capabilities to receive, monitor, and disseminate pertinent weather information. We're talking about all the different hazards that can affect the area: severe weather, tornadoes, tropical weather, winter weather, you name it. So one of the biggest things, one of the most important things about the program is just the relationship that the County Emergency Management builds with the local National Weather Service office. Where I work, we're out of Peachtree City. So it's that relationship, and I want to just recognize Chris and the county. The county has actually been storm ready for 12 years. So this is their 4th renewal. Every 3 years, we continue to modify and adjust and improve the program. So it's not just, you check a box and then you never see each other or talk to each other for years. So it's a constant improvement. And Chris and his team, they've done an excellent job maintaining and growing the capabilities that I mentioned earlier about all the information that they receive, monitor, and disseminate, along with community preparedness as well. So just want to recognize Chris and his team, the county, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening.
And if it's okay, we'd like to take a picture.
Absolutely.
stand over here. All right, here we go.
So we're going to enter into our first period for public comments. Karen is going to read the rules of the meeting, and then we'll call up anyone who has signed up to speak under public comments.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the board. I'd like to take a moment to review meeting procedures. We ask that you please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Those who would like to speak during public comments should complete a public comment form that is available just outside of this room. Information regarding specific requirements to address the board is listed at the podium. Please state this information prior to speaking. All comments should be directed to the entire board and not to a particular commissioner. There are 2 public comment opportunities during the meeting for speakers to make a verbal presentation to the board, one now and one prior to old business. The number of speakers is limited to 10 now and 10 at the second portion. Speakers are selected on a first-come basis and will be heard in the order in which they signed up, with the exception that Forsyth County residents will be heard first, with non-county residents to follow until the time has expired. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Our first speaker this evening is Chester, and sir, I'm going to butcher your last name. So if you...
No, Chester. Kromarski.
I suppose. Good evening. I am Chester Kromarski. I am a county resident. I became a county resident in the early 1980s. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for your service as commissioners and your service that you do to the community. Thanks very much. My topic is the Eagles Beak Park Master Plan. This plan was presented to you commissioners at the work session of August 20th, a little over 2 weeks ago. The master plan received a vote of 3-1 since only 4 commissioners were present and 1 commissioner was absent. Being a time-sensitive item, the plan received approval and with no requirement to appear on the consent agenda. I have a little issue with that, but that is not my topic for this evening. The topic for this evening is a master plan at Eagles Beak. The master plan calls for a playground area with playground equipment, picnic tables, lots of walking trails, and some covered shelters and other items. The cost of the proposed plan is approximately $2.1 million. Payment would be by way of a grant application to the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program. The grant would cover 75%, with the county having 25% responsibility. The 25% responsibility equates to a little over $500,000. Eagles Beak property is a floodplain. Why is the county spending this large sum on floodplain property? Take into consideration the difficulties with the construction of the Eagles Beak canoe launch. That launch cost the county over $1.3 million. I have firsthand knowledge and experience with flooding at Eagles Beak. Over the last 10 years, since that property was leased out to the aviation community, I can attest to at least 3 floods that we went through out there. And 2 of them were absolutely devastating. The tables and The picnic tables that we have there, the work tables, all of that was just floated away. I think you can recall one other flood that happened here about a year ago when Old Federal was shut down. I think you can recall we had Fox News was out here for a few days going back and forth, same thing with Channel 2 News. After the floods we had, I need a minute.
Let me
Make a
pull-
motion to give Mr. McCarthy,
Second.
Chester an extra minute.
We have a motion to extend the speaking time by 1 minute. Please vote.
Thank you.
And that passes a vote of 5-0.
The question is, who will pay for all of the cleanup and repairs needed after a flood? Okay, Eagles Beak Park requires a better plan with consideration given to flooding. One last item. Question is, has the ground been tested for contaminants and hazardous material? You should know that the Etowah River flows through Dawson Forest. Isn't that the location, excuse me, for the nuclear activity during World War II? I know of one. They experimented making nuclear-powered airplane that was never successful. Please do a better plan. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mark Redfern.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this time. I just wanted to find
Can you
out.
you have to restate your name for the record?
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry. My name's Mark Redfern. I'm resident of Rosewood Lake Subdivision on Hyde Road. I was actually hoping to talk later on after the discussion of the Hyde Road Middle School variance and any hopefully you guys are considering doing some road improvements for Hyde Road. So I was actually hoping to talk after that because I wanted to find out what you guys are planning on doing. Can I talk later? Or do I have to?
So during the public comments, it's
Yes, ma'am.
just simply you talking to us and us taking it in, so we can't do a dialogue. But when we come to that item, there may be an opportunity. Actually, I don't think it's a public hearing. So it's probably best to, Commissioner Cooper, you're aware he's out there. She may have,
I'll stay.
Yeah, because I'm sure you guys got some wonderful plans for us. I'd love to hear what they are. I don't want to take any more time.
If you'll make your comments, maybe Commissioner Cooper can make some notes, and then on the item itself, she may be able to comment to some of those.
Really depends upon what was the outcome of the traffic study. Even though it seemed like a short study, I'd really like, I'm sure lots of other folks would like to know what were the results and how much different was the traffic volume compared to the previous traffic study done last year. So, thank you.
thank you.
We have no other speakers signed up. If anyone else would like to address the board during this public comment section, please come forward at this time. Madam Chair, I see none.
Thank you. Moving right along here, is there a motion to adopt the meeting, the minutes of the executive session of August 13th?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting and public hearings of August the 15th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And both of those have passed with a vote of 5-0. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the work session and executive session of August the 20th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes with a vote of 5-0 as well, which brings us to our consent agenda. Ken, do you want me to go ahead and tee it up for
Yes,
a
ma'am.
motion? And then you
invite
can
a motion. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda, should I say as clarified?
As presented is fine.
As presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Before we cast our votes, I believe there needs to be some discussion to clarify a couple of items, Ken.
It's a modest clarification, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. Board members, I want to turn your attention to consent agenda item 2G, which is your approval of the name and logo layout of the Employment Wellness Center. This was something you all discussed and took a look at your work session, and obviously we want to make sure we stay true to the approval that you gave at the work session. That's the way it works. When things come here to the consent agenda, they're supposed to be just as they were approved at your consent agenda, but we have been working, and communications has worked and has made a modest nuance to the look of that. Can we go ahead and put that up on the screen? And I'd like to make sure this is actually broadcast. So you'll see the reference to Forsyth County on there. That's a little different, and a little bit of the art is just a modest bit different than what you all saw at the work session. And so we just want to make sure that before you approve the consent agenda, you'll note the language of the consent agenda says you're ratifying as presented, and as presented, it's a little different. And so we just wanted to make that clear to you so there was no questions later that it looked a little different than what you had seen at the work session. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, and Ms. Shields obviously can answer them as well.
Does anyone have any questions on this item?
If you're otherwise comfortable, you can just approve the motion as stated.
Okay, there's no other clarifications to be made?
No, ma'am.
All right, please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0 as well.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, we're going to move into our public hearings this evening, and once again, Karen's going to read the rules of engagement for public hearing speakers. If you've not completed a form and wish to speak, please do so at this time. Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the public hearing portion of the meeting, each side, those in opposition and those in support, are allotted 10 minutes to speak. Those who would like to speak should complete a public hearing form available just outside of this room. Please fill out both sides and submit your form to the clerk when approaching the podium to speak. If there is more than one speaker for each side, the available time will be divided among the speakers. We will provide a verbal reminder when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Karen. Public hearing number 1, Amy Conrad.
AL 190824 is located in Commission District Number 4. This is a request for approval of an alcohol license for Racetrack Petroleum Incorporated, doing business as Racetrack Store Number 2523. Named licensee is Amber Christine Cummings for an application to sell malt beverages and wine by the package at their place of business located at 4265 Brownsbridge Road.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And the public hearing is now open with a vote of 5-0. If there's anyone who is here to speak in favor of this application, please come forward at this time.
Amber Cummings, Operations Supervisor for Racetrack Petroleum.
And do you have any specific comments, or do you just want to wait for the Q&A?
Yep.
Okey doke. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor that you're aware of, or is there anyone out in the audience? There's not. Is there anyone who is here to speak in opposition to this application? I'm seeing none. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. The public hearing is now closed with a vote of 5-0. Commissioner Mills, this is your district.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just curious. I know you all have opened a lot of racetracks, and do you put them in different names just because your alcohol license? Do you have them in different names, your different locations?
Yes.
That's wise, just because of the way the violations are. And I don't remember seeing violations come in on racetrack for underage sales and different things, so y'all obviously know real well about how to train your people and to make sure that you don't violate. And I know you don't sell any of the wicked products that we hate so bad, or I hate so bad, so I appreciate that. So I don't have any more questions. I appreciate the job you do.
Thank you.
Would you like to offer a motion? Or are there any questions from the board? Would you like to offer a motion?
I will. I would like to make a motion to approve AL 190824, name licensees Amber Christine Cummings, Racetrack number 2523, as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
You know when y'all are going to open?
October. So it's coming up soon.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that motion does carry with a vote of 5-0 for the record.
Thank you.
So coming up to public hearing number 2, and before we get into this too quickly, I wanted to kind of poll the board and see where you are with this. We have two different ordinances that are being heard under one agenda item. We are not set to adopt these tonight anyway. They will actually come back to us in October, I believe, for a final decision. However, in that we're discussing two different items, I don't know whether or not we want to try to poll the audience, see how many people are here to speak on each of those topics, and make a decision ahead of time whether or not we want to separate those two from a public comment standpoint, blend them together, extend time, or whatever might be necessary. So if y'all will indulge me for a second, how many of you are here to speak about the tree ordinance? 1, 2, 3, 4. And how many people are here to speak about the erosion sedimentation? Same group, for the most part, 1. Okay, I don't know, board, do you want to just wing it and go with it, and we'll see if we need to run into some additional time and then do so at that time? All right, in that case, let's move forward then. And we'll hear them together, and again, we're not going to be adopting these tonight. We're simply having our first public hearing. Vanessa, if you could please tee us up, that'd be great.
Yes, tonight Kimberly Horn will give the presentation. Staff will be available after the hearing to answer any questions. That would include our county arborist, Greg Wallace, and myself, as well as Eric. There are obviously multiple components to this work, and as stated, this is the first of 2 required public hearings. The second one will be in the beginning of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and good evening, commissioners. Because we have brought this product to the commission on multiple occasions but have not been back to the public for quite a few months, we did leave in our presentation this evening some of the upfront to bring the public up to speed, but I will go through those fairly swiftly. We do want folks to remember that this is part of a grander effort that actually began in early 2018, a product of the county's recently adopted comprehensive plan update to revise the current tree ordinance, look at our soil erosion and sediment control ordinance and practices, and think about some creative incentives that would create opportunities for innovative low-impact stormwater design. So all 3 of these components were put together. They went through a series of public workshops and input meetings in 2018, and then we began looking at the actual draft language with the commission in April of this year. Now, the ordinance that governs your tree protection and replacement today is Ordinance 98D. And what we learned from the public input process in 2018 is really to focus on a couple of key items, which is to focus on preserving contributing tree stands and specimen trees, making sure that we preserve our larger trees within the county that are older, and to limit the practice of clear cutting, particularly associated with residential subdivisions, and trying to cut down the number of trees that are being taken down at any one time related with residential development. From the public process itself, there were 5 different public workshops that were held throughout 2018. We were able to bring that list down really to a list of 7 items related to the tree protection and replacement ordinance that are being addressed by the proposed changes. Those include refining the definitions within the tree ordinance to make them more clear and useful, requiring tree information from developers early in the process, considering a pre-submittal assessment and preliminary site visit so that staff has a better understanding of what is on the site and needs to be preserved, increasing our tree save areas and requirements, strengthening the recompense standards, increasing fines and penalties for trees that were removed inadvertently or not according to plan, and to recommend updates to the conservation subdivision ordinance to bring that classification back into something that would be useful moving forward within the county. I do want to remind folks that as we work through this process, the balance that we're trying to strike is a balance between preserving trees and protecting the environment, while at the same time honoring and respecting personal private property rights. So there's a delicate balance that we've been weighing as we go through these revisions, and sort of the cheat codes here for those that are looking at the ordinance online. The black text is text that is preserved from the existing ordinance. The red strike through is older text that is being deleted in the proposed ordinance. The green underlined text is text that was already in the ordinance but has moved location within the draft. And the blue text is text that has been added through our work with the commission over the last several months. So I'm going to quickly walk through the major changes to the tree ordinance. Most of our time will be spent on Article 2. That is the section that underwent the most significant change. In Article 1, there were really three primary objectives. One was to update the definitions to make the ordinance as clear, efficient, and useful as possible. And one of those major changes was the term significant trees. So that is our attempt now, as asked by the public, to really clarify what types of trees we are trying to preserve. We've labeled them all under this significant tree category that includes specimen trees, landmark trees, historic trees, other trees that are identified by the county arborist and staff as having significant value. And we've provided a new definition for tree grouping. The wisdom behind the tree grouping is any set of 10 trees that is a significant stand of trees would now be something that could be preserved by the county, regardless of whether any one tree was large enough to be a specimen or not. In your existing ordinance, there's no protection for anything other than those specimen historic. But there are parts of the county that have these large stands of trees that are visually significant. And that's what we're attempting to codify and preserve as part of the identification of a tree grouping. Now, as I mentioned, Article 2 is where the most substantive changes occurred. I've got 5 slides to get through all of the changes in Article 2. So I'll ask for your patience to bear with me as we work through these. Article 2 hits several of those procedural recommendations that we heard from the public. Zoning applications and site plans that need to come to the Board of Commissioners with these changes would have to include more tree information based on the county's GIS system as part of their zoning application. And then as part of the tree protection and replacement plans for construction, the new ordinance would require a tree survey and for all significant trees to be tagged in the field, which hopefully would prevent the inadvertent removal of those trees during the construction process. Article 2 also has been significantly reordered. The biggest change there is Section 2.3, where we have taken all of the permit procedures that were previously in multiple articles and combined them all into one section, as well as the requirements for the tree protection plans, all in one case. We've added and strengthened the criteria of what the replacement trees have to be, and we've added a requirement now that would require a permit for the removal of any significant tree within a major subdivision. We're very protective of personal property rights, and under the current ordinance, if you are a single-family home owner, the property is fully yours and you have full control over that property. In an effort to identify and preserve significant trees, there's not a cost necessarily associated with this, but we would be asking residential homeowners to apply for a permit so that we could educate them on the best practices of tree preservation and try to attempt to save more trees. So there's not a cost to that, but there would be a permit process in order to remove a significant tree. In the proposed ordinance, we have increased the recompense for the unapproved removal of specimen trees. We're basically making it more costly to accidentally remove significant trees. And we have added a stipulation that was originally in some of the design guidelines that you were looking at a county level to require the preservation or planting of 15 overstory trees per acre within common areas that are developed as part of major subdivisions. So those common areas would have the requirement for additional tree preservation and tree cover. Almost to the end of Article 2. Replacement trees and existing trees that are being retained only to meet buffer requirements that are in the UDC will not be considered under the new code fulfilling the tree density requirements. Basically, if you already had to preserve the tree, you don't get extra credit just because you had to already preserve it as part of your buffer. We have added exclusions for acreage of major utility easements. We recognize that where there are major gas lines or major utility lines, you can't plant trees on that land. So we're excluding that from the calculation. And we are adding bonus credits or recommending bonus credits for retaining existing trees that are on greater than 10% slopes. Basically, those trees on greater slopes do a better job of helping us with our erosion control. We want to encourage that. We're recommending a 50% bonus for those trees that are preserved, and likewise recommending a 50% bonus for the preservation of tree groupings, the definition that I spoke to earlier. Last section of Article 2. A couple of policy pieces here of allowing excess existing tree density units to count towards specimen tree recompense. As you'll remember, earlier this summer, we looked at a number of examples where if there were a significant number of specimen trees on the parcel, it was very difficult to plant enough trees to make up the recompense. Essentially, what we are allowing is a practice that is already commonplace, but making it clear within the code that if you have excess tree units that are already on the site and remaining on the site, you can credit those towards your tree recompense requirement. We have increased the contribution to the tree replacement fund as a method of alternative compliance. The current code is $400 per unit. We had an initial recommendation of $800 per unit. Going back and doing some additional research based on some information we've given, we've adjusted that to $750. The reason that it is $750 is looking at a number of recent bids. $750 is basically a traditional average bid price for what it costs to plant two 2-inch trees, which in your code make up 1 unit of credit. So we're adjusting that to the market standpoint at this point. That's why the change to $750. And based on our recent discussions, only for commercial and industrial properties, we are allowing a method of alternative compliance that would allow developments to plant trees within the public right-of-way within 1 mile of the site, to allow that as a means of alternative compliance. That option is at the county's discretion, not at the applicant's discretion, but it is a method that if an applicant cannot meet all of their tree planting requirements on their site, they can enhance the nearby public right-of-way, which still provides an aesthetic and environmental good to the general public because it is on public land. Now, only one slide for the last few articles. Article 3 consolidates all of the construction, tree protection, pruning standards that were already in the ordinance in one article. And we have now added section 3.4, which are tree placement and maintenance standards that would be a set of standards that will hopefully ensure greater longevity and care of new trees that are planted as part of the development process. That was something that came out of our most recent work session. Article 4 increases the performance security that is required of new development from 110% of the cost to 150% of the cost. Basically increases the value of the bond that if the trees don't live or if something happens, you have access to pull the bond to replant the site. And it increases the fines for violation. And Article 5, the Tree Protection Commission, was formerly Article 4. The only thing that's changed is it moved from Article 4 to Article 5 to allow us to insert Article 3. So for those that have been following the process over the last several months, there are really 4 significant changes since the July 9th draft that we brought forward to the work session. I mentioned number 1, we reduced the alternative compliance from $800 a unit to $750 a unit. Again, that's based on the market price that would accomplish your ordinance. So it's basically a break-even point, whether you plant the trees on your site or whether you pay them into the tree fund. Number 2, allows significant tree recompense for commercial and industrial zoning districts only in rear and side buffers as a condition of zoning. So that would be as of right, that if you had a condition of zoning that required you to plant additional trees in the buffer, you get credit for those. If you're preserving existing trees in the buffer, they don't count unless they are a significant tree. And as I mentioned, on public property within 1 mile of the site, but that is at the county's discretion, not at the applicant's discretion. So that is at your option. Also, one of the items you asked us to look at was the creation of a significant tree recompense cap for commercial and industrial zoning districts. In doing the research on that, I will say from the consultant standpoint, we're not sure that this article is absolutely necessary. I think with some of the other alternative compliance means that we're recommending, you may never use this, but in doing the research, what we found is that 30 units per acre would be the recommended cap. At the $750 a unit, basically that is about $22,500 per acre that would be the cap. And of course, that would depend on how many acres your site is. And then number 4, we added those draft standards for tree placement and maintenance as part of Article 3. So those are the proposed changes to the recommended tree ordinance. There's essentially one change to the mass grading ordinance, which is Ordinance 73. The full text is on the screen. I won't read it. Essentially what it says is that for residential developments that are more than 25 acres, there have to be areas of grading that are no larger than 20 acres, and only 2 areas of disturbance can be disturbed at any one time. So what that essentially does is if you've got an 80 or 90 acre subdivision, rather than clearing all 80 or 90 acres at one time, you would be limited to 2 sections of 20 acres at a time that would have to be cleared, stabilized, approved by the Department of Engineering before you could disturb additional land. So what that does is it really limits the areas that can be mass graded at one time, which should help us in our soil erosion and some of the environmental impacts that some of the community is experiencing. One final piece, please remember that there are a series of companion UDC edits to bring this full vision to fruition. Number one, it would be a codification to include areas of separation between those areas of disturbance. That basically, in addition to the very last element we covered, would leave areas that would be undisturbed between each 20 acres of disturbance. Again, a better way to stabilize the soil, a better way to leave some of the existing topography and vegetation between different areas of subdivisions. Number two, we recommend as part of a UDC edit to prohibit major subdivision buffers from being within lot lines. Once it becomes a single family lot, you don't have the ability to preserve those trees. It is totally at the homeowner's private property rights to determine at that point. The best way to preserve some of those trees in a subdivision is to have them fall within a common area or a buffer, not within the residential lot line. Number three is an allowance for open space credit for community accessible low impact stormwater. We'll remind you of that when we bring back the low impact stormwater incentives that we've discussed earlier in this process, but needed to postpone until the state process is updated. And then number four is a reminder that direction that we were given on the May 6th work session to address proposed major subdivision open space limitations. So those are 4 things that are not included in the draft ordinance and will need to be addressed as part of your UDC edits at a later time. So with that, I will stop and let you conduct the hearing and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing? We have a motion and a second. Please vote. We are now open with a vote of 5-0. If there's anyone who is here to speak in favor of the changes that are proposed this evening, please come forward at this time. And I guess we probably could, you can come to either side depending on where you stand on it. We're going to have 10 minutes per side unless we need more.
Hi, my name's Patrick Foster. I live in the Rascarity community in South Forsyth. My address is 3353 Rascarity Road, Cumming, Georgia, 30041. And I'd just like to talk a minute about the proposed tree ordinance that we're talking about today. And by the way, when I was looking at the agenda, I didn't see anything about the mass grading. Personally, I think that might need to be addressed separately because, you know, I didn't think that was going to be addressed today. But anyway, I've been to all the public meetings held with the tree ordinances and the comprehensive plan, the work sessions, and after going to all those and reading the suggestions of the Forsyth County residents at the meeting, it is obvious to me that the vast majority of residents would like less development and more natural look here in Forsyth County. You know, you look at what people are saying on the internet and the blogs and so on, and you know, that's all I usually see. I never see any residents saying, oh, we need more development, we need to entice developers, you know. And since the county is one of the fastest growing counties in the country, to me it doesn't seem like we need to entice developers to come here by giving them special treatment. The county has gone to great expense to contract with consultants and experts that have customized an improved tree ordinance plan based on residents' input and the consultant's expertise from years of doing this sort of thing in the field. And what I don't understand is that some of our honorable commissions seem to want to ignore or water down some of these recommendations because they're worried that it might discourage developers from coming here.
30 seconds.
Well, that's why I was talking about, Forsyth County doesn't really need to entice people to come here. Also, recently changed on the UDC is a proposed recompense reduction for commercial developers of 30 units. I don't see why commercial developers need special treatment and should pay less
Time.
than anybody else. So, and there's no reason why they should.
So just so you know what the audio cues are, just know how much time you have, because it's per side, and so if there are others who wish to speak on that same side of the issue, it's to allow you to kind of break that up a little bit. So that's what the 30 seconds and the time is, just so people can kind of keep track of where they are. If there are a lot of others from your group that want to speak, you can either defer to them or continue if they want you to continue, I suppose. So that's just kind of.
I just have a minute more, if it's okay if I.
Well,
continue.
we won't add it to the time allotment yet. If we run out of time and we still have people who need to be heard, we'll take a vote on how much time to add at the end. But just, you guys are at 7 and 37.
Yeah, I was watching. I wasn't sure.
You can certainly continue. I just want to make you aware of the time constraints. If we run out of time, we can vote to add some additional time. But typically, if there's a lot of redundancy between people saying the same thing, we like to let more voices be heard. Just procedurally, that's how we're doing
Okay,
things.
I'll make it quick then.
I'm not trying to rush you. I just make you aware of what we're doing.
So, as I was saying, I'd really like to propose that we do away with that addition that one of the commissioners requested as far as a hardship compensation sort of thing for the commercial developers. I don't see why they should get any more special treatment than residential. So on page 19 of the ordinance, you'll see that change there about the limit for 30 units for commercial developers. I don't see why we need that, as Eric was just kind of alluding to. If that's really necessary, I don't think so. So maybe we can do without that. The other thing that I just wanted to propose is that the county arborists give more authority in the new zonings and have more staff to assist them, sort of what has been done in some of the nearby counties that are adjacent to us. And a zoning should require approval by the arborist before it can move forward. Right now, yes, he can make recommendations and so on, but to really be effective, I think he needs to have more authority to be able to stop a zoning if it's not proper as far as the tree ordinance is concerned. Well, some people say that issues, by the time they come to public hearing, that all the decisions have already been made. I hope that's not the case, that we're still open for discussion. And also just real quick that Eric alluded to, and that is about the UDC change that all residential buffers be under the ownership of HOA, not the individual lot holders. Dennis and I ran into a big problem with that right near where I live, so hopefully that can also be brought up as a UDC change. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Federica Goldoni. I am a resident of Forsyth County. I am a mother, and I am a tree hugger. And I'm here today because I would like to ask you if you could seriously commit to plan for trees first in any kind of development. It can be commercial, industrial, or residential development. I truly believe that any development can happen if we can plan for trees first and around trees. And I agree that the county arborist should be given a leading role in all the steps of the way in this process, and he should have true veto power in the decisions. And I also believe that a lot of the people that I interact with move to this area for the beauty of the native forest. And when I talk about trees and forest, I'm talking about valuable trees. And I believe that the next version of this tree ordinance can be significantly improved. And maybe our next public hearing
30 seconds.
be outside in the sun, in the heat, to remind us how important it is to be in the shade of our trees and next to trees and live next to trees, especially because I feel that this is September is the 5th month of the year in this intense heat, and we tend to forget how important it is to be in the shade. And when I talk about
Time.
shade, I don't mean the shade provided by replacement saplings, but the shade provided by our forest and native trees, and the oxygen that they provide, and the beauty of the scenery. Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Robert Slaughter. I'm a resident in Forsyth County, District 5, and I am the founder and current managing director of Smart Growth Forsyth County. I'll keep my comments brief. First, thank you for undertaking this revision, particularly given the current circumstances and importance of trees that we're all seeing in the media today. I'll keep these pretty granular. First, I really applaud where you have inserted the county arborist into the process, flipping the director with the county arborist. However, I would point out specifically in 2.3C of the UDC, where the tree protection and or replacement plan states that it will require approval and sign off, but you never really state who it is who's doing the signing off. I don't know if that's the planning director or if, as you continue to read the UDC, it's implied that that is the county arborist. I think it would benefit your change to specify that explicitly in the UDC. The second thing I would offer is that I think you can expand the scope of what the Tree Protection Committee has to offer to your process. You have an existing board
30 seconds.
that is appointed by individual commissioners to look at, or actually to hear appeals to the tree ordinance. Why not use them similar to a planning commission and allow them to review proposed developments for their compliance with the with your ordinance, and or let them be a resource
Time.
to your county arborist, so that he has enough resources to do his job. And as Patrick had pointed out, you've got a lot of great changes, but if you don't resource the county arborist, he's going to be leaping off one of these garages here trying to get done everything that you've written in your ordinance. And the last thing I'm going to say is about Ordinance 73. I'll disagree with your consultant that it stops mass grading. It doesn't. It delays it. It segments it. You take your 80 or 90 acre plot, and now you're just breaking it up into 20 acre squares separated by vegetation. And then you have to wait until it's stabilized. And if you read the definition of stabilization in your UDC, that's essentially throwing straw over it to stabilize the soil so that it doesn't erode. And then they can move on to the next block. So you're still, out of an 80 acre plot, you're going to be clearing upwards of 60 out of those 80 acres. So it's going to look like a checkerboard instead of one complete sweep. So to me, that's kind of like, pig on or a lipstick on a pig. It's still doing the same thing. So please take a moment, go back and take a look at your mass grading ordinance, see if you can't make it a little more robust. Thank you.
Just as a time check, we have about 34 seconds left on this side of the issue. I know we've got a couple other speakers. It's apparent that the pro and con format that we normally have for these is a mixed bag, and so at this time I think we'll just stick with the original 10 minutes plus 10 minutes, and if we run out of time at the end, we can then entertain adding some extra time, because it doesn't appear that anybody is fully in support or fully in opposition. So I'm just going to state that up front. Claudia, if you want to, we've added the additional 10 minutes on there, so we'll keep rolling with it when we.
Hi there, my name is Claudia Castro. I'm the Deputy Director of Smart Growth Forsyth County, living in Forsyth County for the last 20 years. Smart Growth has been involved very much so behind the scenes with this ordinance change, language change. We have submitted to the BOC and to the planning commissioners, as well as to the consultant, our 4-step plan, which consists of number one priority is to actually plan for the trees. So with respect to planning for the trees, I just want to go to the ordinance language draft. Let's see, the draft, and I don't have the page number here, I'm sorry, but where it's regarding the pre-submittal conference. What we would really like to see is the developers and design professionals, instead of being encouraged to meet with the planning team and the arborist, we would like the language to read that developers and design professionals shall or must meet prior to, with presenting this pre-submittal format. There's no way, there is just no way for you to really grab the project and have your stamp on it and have it do what you want it to do if you don't have them come first, meet with the proper people, and have the plan put forward before submitting the real paperwork. So that's our number one thing, is plan for the trees first, because once they're cut, once someone said, oops, sorry, we've cut it down, it's too late. 15 years is how long it takes for a 30-foot tree to have a crown. 15 years. So what you do today, you're planning for 15 years from now. You may not sit in the shade of that tree. Your child might, your grandchild might, but you probably won't. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about these things, that this is future planning. The reason we're talking about future planning is because countries all around the world are future planning. Ireland committing to plant 440 million trees. Ethiopia, in a record-breaking tree planting, planted 350 million trees in one day. Why? Because they understand the importance of trees, and we are not as critical. We don't have a 4% tree cover left. We're pretty good, but we don't want to get to that stage. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that there's mention in section 2.14 about a tree replacement fund, and then later on there's mention of a Forsyth County Tree Fund. So I'm a little confused as to which is which, A. B, who is administering or administrating this fund and keeping watch over it and deciding where the money goes, and what exactly is being done with that money. Is this a recompense in a public area? Are trees going to be planted in a common space from this fund? I'm not really 100% sure what that is. So that's with regard to the ordinance. Real quick, I've given you the 15-year crown plan. I won't go and tell you what a tree is worth, because a tree is worth, per the University of Calcutta Professor T.M. Das, a living tree for 50 years, the worth is $193,000 based on the protections that it provides, erosion protection, pollution protection, etc. I told you about Ireland and Ethiopia. So now that was all future. I would like to go to the past to 1913, and I would like to read to you a poem by Joyce Kilmer. Joyce Kilmer was a young man who died in World War I, and before he died, he wrote this poem. It's entitled Trees, and I'm sure you've heard at least one very significant portion of it. I think I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the sweet earth's flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who's here to speak on either side of the issue since we've combined the time? Okay, please come forward. You can submit a form if you have not done so already.
Good afternoon. My name's Avery Howell. I'm a landscape architect here in town and have been registered in the state of Georgia for 34 years. And I don't want to say that I'm speaking in opposition. I'd like to make some comments about the ordinance. I've been involved in some of the very first tree ordinances back in the mid-'80s, telling my age. First with Gwinnett, then with Cobb. We made some recommendations when those came out. I've also been involved in several counties in writing landscape guidelines for some major developments that the developers then themselves enforced. I've been able to see how the tree ordinance has evolved over the last 25 or 30 years. And actually, I'm a member of the Forsyth County Tree Commission. So we're here to make comments on the tree ordinance. And what I'd like to say is I went back today and pulled out some ordinances all the way back to 1991. And from Alpharetta, Beaufort, Suwannee, Gwinnett County. And in none of those did they include single-family detached residential into the ordinance. And what we have here is in Section 2.1, 3 and 4, and Section 2.9A4, we've included significant trees into individual single-family residential, stating that a specimen tree then becomes part of that significant classification. And as I said, I've always believed that that should not be. In fact, that's one of the reasons I wanted to be, or agreed to be on the Forsyth County Tree Commission, was because I do not believe that individuals should be included in that. I think it's a administration and enforcement nightmare, a compliance nightmare. Someone in this room probably could tell me how many individual residential lots there are in Forsyth County. And if we imagined even 3, 4, 5% of those in 1 year who wanted to cut one tree, it would probably be an impossibility for our arborists. I've seen some of the other counties increase their legs on this type thing. There's a nearby city that requires a land disturbance permit to cut a tree in your yard. And I was involved with that a year ago. My client wanted to cut some trees to put a trampoline in for his daughter. So we went through a month-and-a-half process to get that done. So I just want to encourage you that we rethink that, because what happens, even as you see in some of the larger cities where you pay per circumference inch, or I should say square foot inch, one of the large cities to our south requires a fee per square inch for you the privilege to take down your tree, and then you pay a tree surgeon to take that down. What happens is people don't remove the trees. They become then diseased or hazardous, and in a storm, we block streets. They fall on people. They fall on cars and houses. So I know I should be a tree hugger. I love trees, and I appreciate the value of that. But I think, and what we've done with the developments, the large developments, and requiring, the 2 trees per lots and that sort of thing, I have no problem with that. My only reservation with that is some of the lots, as they get to 10,000 square feet, are really hard to get an overstory tree to grow without being cut in a few years, because it's overwhelming the yard. So that's just something to consider if we want those trees to live a long time. The other thing it does, if a homeowner does not know about this ordinance and has not read the unified code, and mistakenly he wants to add a patio, a deck, extend his driveway because his family's growing, cuts that, a neighbor tells on him and reports him, then say it's a 25-inch poplar or pine, and we all know if we've got any land at all, it doesn't take long for one of those to get to 25 inches. Then the penalties for that, replacing that 25-inch tree, are 68 3-inch trees. That's if it's a specimen tree and he replaces it at 4 times the value. If it happened to be a historic or landmark tree, he's got to put 137 trees in there. The cost of those 3-inch trees, around $31,000. And then if he has to put in 137 replacement, $61,000. So I just want the citizens to understand that that's the cost for the recompense on your personal property. 2 other notes on the ordinance. One is that, let's see where we are here. I believe there should be a statement put in there regarding columnar trees used in the developments. I pulled out some catalogs yesterday quickly, and I identified 17 varieties of columnar type trees, oaks, maples, sweet gum, everything you can imagine is now being grown in a pencil shape. There's a large commercial development to the north of here that you could go see, where they've probably used 80 to 90% columnar trees to get around the whole canopy thing. It completely negates the tree ordinance to me, because you're trying to get overstory, you're trying to prevent heat islands. So I would suggest that we look into that those not be allowed, or a very, very small percentage on that. I believe that's the only thing that I have. I had a comment about the recompense staying at $400, but I understand the $750 with that. It does come out to about the same amount with that. But I do believe it would be punitive for a single homeowner if he did not know, or if he's a second homeowner, maybe the developer tells him, you've got this 25-inch tree, it's historic. But I sell my house, I don't tell the next guy that it's a historic tree. And so he bears the burden of that. Thank you.
Got about 18 seconds left if anybody's got any final words of wisdom.
Good afternoon. I'm Udc. I'm a resident of Forsyth County. My question is, up to 10 or 15 years ago, there was no mass grading. And I know every development you go to, everything's being mass graded. If you could do it then, you go to some nice subdivision, none of them are mass graded. You Creekstone, Laurel Springs, Aberdeen.
Bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to ask for an extension.
How much does it need?
Would the board? How much do you need? A minute? 2 minutes?
A minute.
Would your
Make a
board
motion
entertain?
for a minute.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Reset the clock.
All
Continue.
these nice subdivisions were not mass graded,
Right.
and they're doing fine. Everything looks nice in them. But when you're mass grading, I sold my house this year, and I'm living in a rental house that houses are next to each other. They've mass graded. They put them next to each other, and you cannot keep that soil in. It's hard to stabilize soil with grass, because every time it pours down rain, it washes down, because there's no topsoil in there to absorb the water to get to the grass. It just washes down and washes the dirt into the streets. That's all I have to say.
Thank
we need
you.
to stop the mass grading. Thank you.
Everybody get to say their piece that wanted to say their piece. We will be hearing this again. We're not deciding tonight. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Public hearing is now closed for public participation, but is open for discussion. Board members, any comments or questions that we might want to direct at staff, or if there's somebody who posed a question that you want clarification on?
Before
please.
anybody leaves the room, before y'all leave the room, the gentleman that spoke, I guess, not necessarily opposite of you all, y'all had fantastic points. He also had some pretty good points. Is there any way you guys could sit down at a table together and come to some meeting in the minds? Is that possible? Thank you. And if y'all would do that on your own, I'd appreciate that.
And y'all are welcome to stay during our deliberations. I think we're going to have some discussion, or not, if you don't wish to. A couple of points were brought up that come to mind for me to try to get some clarification on from staff. One of the one of the points that was made was to clarify the Forsyth County Tree Fund versus the Tree Replacement Fund, if we need to harmonize those somehow in the upcoming draft. I believe Claudia brought that up. And then also to clarify who has the administration of that role. So Tom Brown, do we need to just harmonize some language, or are we talking about two distinctly different entities at that point? Or actually, Greg, I didn't see you over there. There you are.
I'm going to pass that to Greg.
It's speaking of the same fund.
Okay.
So we just need to clear that language
Yeah.
up and make sure it's consistent.
Okay, that would certainly take some of that question mark out of there.
Laura,
As far as
picking
the person administering that, would that fall under your office, Greg, or would that fall under Tom Brown?
Currently, it is a combined effort.
Okay.
Look at these requests,
Okay.
and we rely heavily on y'all, but we don't have any one person who is.
Okay.
Can I ask one question
Sure.
on that same, like on the Coal Mountain overlay, they can vary and pay into a fund on that. Does it go into the same fund? It doesn't.
The Coal Mountain overlay goes specifically into the, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but it's y'all's discretionary fund for roadside beautification.
That stays separate. Okay.
Two different funds.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board?
I had.
Go ahead.
I don't know really who this goes to, but I was a little confused, and Dennis was showing me some language that was in there. Mr. Howell had pointed out about the single-family homeowners having to pay, I guess Eric, on having to I think you stated in there that they have to get a permit, but they don't have to pay.
So I pulled out that particular section. It's on page 21 of the draft. So it applies to significant tree removal within a lot that is within a major subdivision. So if your lot is not within a major subdivision, if you've got a 10-acre lot that's an ag lot, it doesn't apply. It only applies to major subdivisions. It is a tree removal permit process, but 4D does say that if the request includes a specimen tree, that recompense shall be in accordance with section 2.7, which are the same standards for specimen tree removal for everyone. So from what I heard from the comment, I think if you wanted to look at specifically section D, that would be something you would want to look at.
So essentially what you're saying is there's no cost to apply for the permit to remove that, but it's an opportunity for education. However, proceed at your own risk. So if they do choose to take the tree out, they are still responsible for the recompense.
As it is written, that is
Okay.
correct. I mean, if our focus is we want to give people a chance to be educated and give them some other options, you might consider re-looking at line D. But D does require the recompense.
I have a real problem with that.
I got a problem with that too. I have a question. What if the tree is causing some sort of harm on the property?
So it does say that if it poses a hazard to people or property, that landmark and historic trees can be approved for removal. But then it doesn't directly address the recompense.
Yeah, because, it costs money to get a tree that's causing damage. It costs money to get that removed, and then, for there also to be some sort of penalty on top of that, or having to do a permit or whatever, because of having it removed, because of the damage being done. That's a bit of a catch-22. And this is a private property owner. So my other question on that, you said major developments. Where do you draw the line? What is major and what's not major as far as developments go?
Yeah, I believe that's codified in the UDC.
It is.
It is,
It's
okay.
7 lots or more.
Okay. Regardless of the size of the lots.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board members, I just want to mention one thing with respect to just that permit issue. And again, it may be covered elsewhere. I didn't see it. But Commissioner Mills, to the extent your question was, would they have to pay a fee for the permit? I don't know that the fees would be set by way of this ordinance, and so typically there would be a fee for most permits. Maybe that's not the expectation, but I just want to make that clear. It's not.
Permit's not what I'm worried, I mean.
Well, I agree, that is the recompense that was driving your question, but I thought you also mentioned they wouldn't have to pay a permit fee. I just don't
That was
see
me.
that. Okay, that
Yeah,
was
but
you.
some
Thank
of
you.
these
The way that
people-
the way I read it was there was no permit fee, but you were, at that point, they were educating the homeowner.
I think
And
my-
if they decided to proceed, it was at their own risk for recompense.
And it's
And that's
typical
how-
we won't put the fee in the ordinance.
That's right. My only
We
point
set
was-
fees by our fee schedule.
Right,
and
but
we
there will
typically
be a
don't put it-
fee.
So there likely will be a fee.
Okay.
That's what I was getting to. I think
But-
there
Oh,
would be.
okay, so there would be a fee, it's just
I think
not
there would
outlined
be, unless you
in the
expressly say
ordinance.
there's not going to be one. There typically would be one.
But
is
the
my-
cost to remove the tree could cost some people, I mean, a fourth of what they might have paid for the house.
Well, once you go through a site plan process and possible recompense, I mean, I don't think it'll cost that much, but it could be. I don't know.
Could. I just am afraid that we're creating something that's going to our goal is to promote more trees, and we're going to create a process that's going to make people hesitant to plant more trees. I mean, and that's not what our goal would be. Our goal would be to want to create more trees, and you put such a big price tag on it that people are going to think twice, well, ooh, I better not go plant that tree, because then I got to ask people, I mean, the government will be, here we are.
I don't think people will be planting specimen
I will say
trees,
the
so
way-
no.
But they grow big. They don't stay specimen.
Well, I will say this: landmark and the landmark and historic tree. The way I'm reading those definitions, nobody in this lifetime is going to create one. But specimen trees, I understand. That's a different animal.
Is there any concern, and Ken maybe or Tom on the date time frame, that a person has agricultural land, if this becomes so egregious and so expensive to deal with the trees, can they not clear their farmland and then wait 3 years to file for zoning and already have the whole thing cleared? Does that not start to encourage more people to take that process? Could it not?
I'm not sure.
I've seen it.
Yes, potentially.
Potentially.
It still has the 3-year time frame where if the property's cleared, they're not eligible to rezone for 3 years.
And
But
that happens.
As the
Well,
ordinance.
I just saw it near West Forsyth High School, and nothing's happening. I'm assuming they're just going to sit there for 3 years and wait. And they cleared it out. And I hate to think one reaction creates a very negative reaction if we're not careful. I like saving trees. I just don't want it to encourage others to take a bunch out, and we're not thinking about what we may cause. And I'm even more so concerned what we've already seen is we make this so egregious that the city of Cumming wants to start annexing everything on behalf of those owners so they don't have to comply with our tree ordinance. I mean, we've seen that already start to happen. I just don't know what the balance is. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't know what that balance is.
I mean, Molly and I've talked about, that's the greatest fear, is we've got to be sensible, or that's exactly what happens, is that everybody, I mean, they already get greater density, and if the cost becomes so outrageous, we're just enticing them one more time.
I want to, there's not a bigger tree hugger out there than I am. I mean, really, I get it.
We can't do this.
We can't, Claudia, I'm sorry, we can't. Thank you.
Let me finish, if you would, please. If you don't mind, I'd like to finish my statement. Thank you. But yet, you have a community where whatever we put in this ordinance has to work across the board for everything. Therefore, we have to get it right. And I am all for saving the trees, absolutely. But then there comes to a point if there has to be some common sense on what we're doing. Like I said before, what if a tree is doing damage to someone's property? They're not supposed to be able to remove that. I would like to see more concentration and clarity on any clear cutting and where we stand now as far as clear cutting. I'm against that. I understand that that is extremely detrimental, and I hear that completely. I want to see the trees saved. I want to see the trees preserved But at the same time, you have got people that are property owners that have a right to do on their property. So it's not a clear black or white issue.
I'd like to share, when I built my house, actually constructed it myself, I had two of the most beautiful trees you've ever seen. They were huge. And I placed my house where it'd be perfectly framed between these big, beautiful trees. And 2 years later, from the grading and trying to stay off them, they died. I had to take them down. It was heartbreaking. But I took the initiative and I replanted a bunch of trees. But I got to tell you, these big, beautiful trees, unless you have enough space to stay off a third past their root line, the stress and the vibration of that equipment just kills them. I mean, we have to be reasonable. It's just the way it is. I couldn't stand it when they died. They're the most beautiful hickory trees you've ever seen. And I wasn't able to frame my house like I thought I could. So that's reality. I mean, it just is. So they have to take out some. Otherwise, they're there and they're now over structures and they're very risky and very dangerous to remove.
Plant some new trees?
I did.
Did you frame your
Matter of
house?
fact, one of them was so big when it went in the ground, that root ball went in so fast that the tree hit me in the rumpus and set me there about 8 feet.
Okay.
My wife laughed tremendously.
Are there any other questions or comments that the commissioners
did.
may have, or direction that we want to maybe give to staff for when this comes back to us to revisit some of these things in light of the comments that we heard tonight?
I have one more question for Eric. Eric, we kept getting complaints, or recently it came up with the city, one of the annexations that I think the example, and Christopher Light maybe could tell us more of that. Christopher, you had a business that was wanting, and this maybe wasn't the one with the city, but to comply with our tree ordinance, it was going to be some outrageous amount of dollars.
But then we found it really wasn't.
No, not that one.
Okay.
It was the one, Christopher. You can come up here. I just wondered, with this, is there a way we can analyze how much this is going to cost before we adopt it, and not do a Nancy Pelosi and adopt it and then figure out later how much it's going to cost?
Yeah, I don't know. The guy I met with about that, he analyzed just basic terms, how much a 3-inch caliper is going to cost, how many he's going to have to plant in a 40-foot buffer based on the landscape ordinance, and he came up with a number. I will say this: there's a property on Highway 20 that's permitted under the Beaufort Highway overlay that requires a 25-foot frontage landscape buffer. It's 2 acres. He's only permitting half of it because he couldn't afford to do the second acre. And the tree costs, we got 2 landscape quotes for GDOT, $79,000 for 1 acre. So I don't know if that matters. That's a real number. I've seen 2 appraisals for on that part, and that didn't have anything to do with site density or anything, just a overlay landscape buffer.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to answer, I believe the question I was asked, under the ordinance, the way that it's written today, and under most traditional ordinances, no, there's not a way to cap it. The method that we looked at for creating a cap certain is that 30 unit per acre maximum. That is a way to cap it.
Which is like $22,000 an acre.
Amount. But at 30 units, that is $22,500 per acre.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to know what Tom and the arborist think about the proposed change.
Plan as a whole, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, and just in general, about enforcement, about permitting, just
Greg, we will. Greg has a summary of some of the things he considers to be the most significant changes that you'll see if this was adopted as currently proposed.
I think clear.
Is your red button lit?
I apologize. I think clearly y'all have hit on one of the biggest, most costliest thing for our citizens is the requirement for homeowners. That's something that would affect the public, but as far as if it would affect us as well, as I would anticipate potentially needing someone else to help me handle all those cases. It could potentially be quite numerous. So there are some positive things for at least for enforcement in these changes. Tagging the specimen trees in the field, identifying those clearly. requiring the information at the time of zoning, that's going to help us make at least a more informed comment or suggestion that, clearly we don't have the authority, or I don't have the authority to make a decision on that zoning, but at least we can make an informed recommendation. The alternative planning off-site for some of the commercial developments where it makes sense, I think, is a reasonable thing. We still get the same number of trees, but we might be able to put them in a place that makes more sense as opposed to planting them too densely or too tightly on one site. So I like that. The change to buffers is something not to be overlooked, or the way we count trees within buffers. I know we've spent some time in the work session on that, but just to reiterate, currently when a developer plants a new tree in a buffer that's required by a zoning condition or the Unified Development Code, they can count that tree as credit also toward their tree density requirement. The proposed change before you now would disallow that. They wouldn't be able to get that. So now that's not saying they wouldn't have to plant those trees. They've still got to plant those trees in the buffer. And then on top of that, or in addition to that, plant the trees necessary to meet the tree ordinance. So I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. That's a big change. Want to make sure you're aware of that. That could add some cost. I think as far as answering the concerns of the public that we received during the public comment sessions, months ago, I think this maybe makes some small steps toward answering some of those. I think it doesn't address it all, especially as it relates to mass grading and clear cutting of large tracts. And frankly, I don't think that's a function of the tree ordinance. I think that's something to be addressed with the grading ordinance and development regulations in the UDC. When the lots are so small, or they just virtually demand mass grading in order to build those small lots. But by and large, it's got some good things. I think there's some things, as we heard tonight, that you're going to hear some opposition to, probably from some constituents as this gets more out into the public eye. But I think, and too, Commissioner Brown, you may be interested in this. I think if we adopted this thing exactly as it's written, I would anticipate us coming, or Tom coming to you and requesting some additional funds, some additional resources or personnel.
Are there any further questions or comments, or are we ready to go ahead? And this will, like I said, will be coming back to us.
If this is going to possibly cost us to add employees, more staff, then the recompense of these trees, maybe some of it needs to go back into the general fund to pay for that additional staff.
Then you're taking away from the trees.
I understand, but you hear what's getting ready to happen? We're getting ready to have to add staff, and I don't know what it costs for your staff.
Perhaps.
Well, maybe your permitting can help cover that.
Something, maybe the permits or whatever you decide, but something has to adjust to try to offset that additional expense. Every time we create something, we have to think about where we're going to get the funding from to cover it.
Eric,
My understanding, our main expense is going to be in trying to cover the permitting for that on private property, removal of a tree, of a specimen tree, or is that?
Yeah, and if we don't do that, then we wouldn't have to do it.
You're gonna,
That's right. And again, private property, somebody's private property, having to get a permit.
You start doing that, good Lord, we're gonna get yelled at.
Did we look at, I know we talked about it, and I haven't read the ordinance close enough to know, did we look at the type of trees we plant versus the size of the lot?
We do have language in there that would.
We did.
Well, now, let me back up a little bit. Maybe not necessarily the size of the lot, but the size of the planting space available.
Okay.
So, it's not saying so many trees on so many square foot lot, but the right tree for the right space kind of approach.
Because if not, we're going to make them cut down the trees that we're going to charge them to cut down.
And we do have some language for newly planted trees to help provide space.
That's correct. In the new maintenance section and procedure section that we added, there are minimum planting areas based on the type of tree. So it's absolutely right. Not related to the lot size, but it is related to the plant material that you're trying to plant.
Should we put it by lot size? I mean, I'm talking particularly about the small lot sizes that I've seen, like at Hampton for the townhomes. we didn't have that, and now the trees are coming up in the driveway, the roots are, and they're coming up in the, I mean, we've got the wrong kind of tree planted on the small lots, and they're causing all kinds of problems everywhere.
I think the arborist review at the front end of the process
Yeah,
is
and I believe
designed
It's
to
good, yes.
capture that.
And there are distance standards to pavement, to sidewalks, to roadways that are also included in those standards?
Something you brought up a little bit, you touched upon it. There will be some crossover with the revamping of the conservation zoning, some crossover with the tree ordinance as well. So there will be some trees saved that'll be balanced out with the developer saving those trees. This is what credit you get for that. So it will be encouraged for that which is an actual conservation zoning, which is in the works at this point.
Yeah,
So that's something that people need to understand as well. Or would be nice for them to know. I'm not saying they need to understand it, but I just want them to be informed.
Correct.
That there is
Absolutely.
something else with that.
A recommendation of both the comprehensive plan, I believe, but definitely out of this process was re-looking at the conservation subdivision ordinance, which basically allows greater tree preservation on parts of the lot in exchange for consolidating
Exactly,
lots
and
in a
that's,
small
and I know that Vanessa's worked
And
diligently with that.
I'm jumping in here because the recent conservation subdivision change is going to give increased credit for tree groupings. So you are right, there is kind of a connection, a tandemness, if you will, with the conservation subdivision work that's actually going before the Planning Commission this month.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was, and that makes, I feel very good about that.
Great.
So,
Is there any, Dennis?
One more.
You have another?
Yeah, Avery mentioned, Avery Howell, that in all of his dealings around Metro Atlanta and other places, that he didn't see any where you had the individual homeowners impacted as much. Where did we get that to go in ours?
Yeah, there actually are. He did mention the large city to the south, which has a very restrictive tree ordinance. There are many cities between here and there that now have what I was speaking to in the presentation, and I will apologize for misspeaking because I was speaking to the intent. There are quite a few municipalities now in Metro Atlanta that do require a permit or that have a limit to the number of trees that can be removed by a single-family homeowner within any one calendar year. So what you are starting to see in the Atlanta market are a number of cities that, similar to what I spoke to, which was the intent, which is requiring homeowners to obtain a permit so that they know of the processes, so that their neighbors potentially are aware that they're getting ready to take out a number of trees. So the permit process is becoming fairly standard in the Atlanta Metro. The recompense maybe not so much.
And that's to remove one tree on private property.
One or more. It varies from city to city. In the city that I live in, it's any one tree. In other cities that we looked at, if you're doing 3 or less, you don't need a permit. If you're doing more than 3, you do.
And just real quick, clarification on page 7 on land clearing for agricultural purposes. And Ken, this may be for you, but to Todd's point, does that exempt farmers and if you're doing agricultural clearing? So that even applies to specimen trees and any
Yes.
tree?
Any tree on
That is a-
agricultural use can be removed.
That's a full exemption.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, if I may make one
Absolutely.
additional statement, because Greg brought up an absolutely excellent point. We've had a lot of discussion about trees and buffers, and do they count or do they not count? We did in this last round of edits sort of meet halfway on that point. In the July draft, nothing in the buffer counted. With the new changes that have been made, if there are required plantings in the buffer as part of a condition of zoning, they do get to count those now. So there is sort of a halfway point that we arrived at. Greg was absolutely right. In the July draft, nothing in the buffer counted, but we have come back on that.
I'd just like to make a point of the examples that you gave for the private property tree removal permit and penalty or fine if someone does that. Those are municipalities. So this one is for county-wide. We're not a municipality, and in municipalities generally much smaller as far as square miles, as well as much more urban, a lot more commercial. So to take that and try to fit that into Forsyth County as a whole, I'm not sure that that's a good fit.
Any further comments or direction? We have the schedule come back before us on, what is it, October 3rd? Is that right? Well, I guess if we're all ready to move on to the next item, we will do that at this time. We will hear this again on October the 3rd. Is that correct, Tom? Is that when we're advertising for? That is correct. Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks, everyone. And that takes us to public hearing number 3. Tom, are you bringing that to us?
Yes, I am. Just organizing my paperwork here.
Oh,
Public
that was
hearing
fine.
number 3. This is located in Commission District number 4. It's a public hearing request for alternate design approval for 3530 Matt Highway LLC, Coal Mountain Storage. The property is located at 3530 Matt Highway.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. We're open with a vote of 5-0. If there's anyone who is here to speak in favor of this application, please come forward at this time.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Jonathan Beard. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 3530 Matt Highway. As Director Brown already mentioned, this is for Coal Mountain Storage for an alternate design review. A brief summary of the subject property. As you can see, it is located just west of Coal Mountain Elementary on Highway 369. It is currently zoned CBD. Includes 2 tax map parcels as listed there. It is currently zoned CBD. This was originally zoned back in 2005 is when the actual vote took place to zone it to CBD and have the zoning number listed there as well. It came before you a couple of years ago with a final approval early last year for a zoning condition amendment to allow self-storage as self-service storage as opposed to the previous zoning condition which allowed open storage. So that's just a brief background. Here is the plan that was approved with the AZ 160021, which, as you can see there, is a self-storage facility. There is an office building located to the southwest with additional self-storage units, 2 of which are multi-level. Again, this was the plan that was approved with the previous zoning condition amendment. As one of those conditions, the subject property is subject to the Coal Mountain overlay. There are a few different provisions of the Coal Mountain overlay, which the applicant is seeking an alternate design, some of which are more of a clarification as opposed to, a different intent than the Coal Mountain overlay. So as you can see there, there's a list of the materials that are permitted in the Coal Mountain overlay. I do want to call your attention to one of the things that we'll be mentioning later is the maximum facade. The materials allowed has a hard cap, and that is one of the things that we are requesting an alternate design to. So the applicant has 3 requested alternate designs, and we'll get into each one of those, but 2 of which pertain to this specific section of the UDC and the Coal Mountain overlay. The other one is to subsection 4 of the same provision of the UDC, which requires a variation in the roof line as well as offsets for buildings that are longer than 100 feet. So essentially you would have outlets from the roof line. As I mentioned, there are 3 different provisions of the UDC and the Coal Mountain overlay that we're seeking an alternate design to. The first of which is to allow the use of EFS as a building material. In the previous versions of the Coal Mountain overlay, EFS was a prohibited material. It got removed from that list, but it was not added to the allowed. So to clear that up, we are requesting an alternate design to that specific section. The second of which is the use of stucco and architectural grade metal. These are allowed materials, but as I mentioned in that allowed materials table, it has a hard cap of 50%. And as I'll get into later, there are some times where the topography of the subject property makes the hard cap of 50% not allow the walls, the exterior walls to align. The last one is for the roof line variation and outlets. They're required of subsection 4. The proposed use is a self-storage facility. So we have a required 20-foot separation in between buildings. So specifically what we're looking for is to not impede that 20-foot separation between buildings, as larger vehicles are going to be coming through here, and also as worst case scenario, should a fire start at the facility, allowing fire trucks to pass through there. If you have outlets that impede on that, fire trucks may not be able to pass through those. So what we're requesting is a flat facade along the roof lines to not cut into that 20-foot separation. And I'll show you some images here. So this is a prime example of a situation where the topography, if you have a 50% cap, if you want to keep that 50% cap, your wall is essentially going to go at an angle. So to allow uniformity, to allow the walls, the exterior walls to align, there are some instances where the lower material may need to go above that 50%. So this is just an example of what we're attempting to do. And this one in particular, it's just over 50%. I think it's at 51 or 52%. So but per the code, if it's over 50%, then it doesn't comply. So and for the other one, this is, essentially what the intent is between buildings, to have a flat facade. So, so you don't have these outlets coming into the alleys between buildings. Other buildings would have part of the roof that would jut out, but this is the intent, to have a smooth facade in between the buildings. The buildings along the right-of-way would comply with UDC. That is not what we're looking to do. It's just the interior walls of the storage facilities. So the exterior would match and comply with the coal mountain overlay. And I'll certainly answer any questions you might have. If there's any opposition, then I'd certainly like to reserve the remainder of my time to speak
Certainly.
to those.
Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition to the application? All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
The motion is second, please vote. We're closed with a vote of 5-0. I'm sure we will have some questions. On that, I have one, just while it's up there. The illustration that we're looking at now, are those representing roll-up doors then, or is that just siding?
Those would be the doors.
Okay.
And to the storage units.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure Commissioner Mills has some questions for you. It's her district.
Thank you. Tom and I had talked after I met with you guys yesterday, and Tom then met with y'all after I met with you. And I also reached out to 4 of the Coal Mountain Overlay people just to run by them what we would be discussing now and to get their memory of the EFS and our discussion with it, to make sure that they agreed that it wasn't meant to be left off. Some of them that are architects even said that they like it preferred over some types of stucco, that it doesn't crack as bad if it's a good quality. I don't know how we ensure it's a good quality. I mean that, Tom, maybe I'm asking you, but we put it, I know that this is just a variance for now, and I've got to get in the loop, I guess, to make a UDC change for the Coal Mountain Overlay to get it on the list, but I don't know how you provide for the quality when you just I don't know, David McBrayer and Paul Hamby both said, you know, that both of them see it used on products. They see it used in hotels a lot, and that it's very desirable product to use if it's a good quality product that's used.
Is there maybe a thickness of application or a certain amount of grit or some quality standard that we could call out to reference that, to give Commissioner Mills the result she's looking for?
Right. Not that I could quote you without doing some research.
Charles?
My name's Charles Conklin. I'm the applicant, and I've been developing up here these storage facilities for about 20 years. I still own all the ones that I developed, and so, you know, the only thing I can say is that's my plan. Keep owning, they're not selling, so I want as good quality as I can get because, you know, I own the original one that I built up there in your district.
I know, and you know I hate it.
I know you do, but I did what
I tell you
asked,
constantly
and,
how bad I
did
hate
my
that.
best to cover it up with shrubbery and stuff, so.
He did put a bunch of trees, Paul did, to cover it up. I guess I'm just going to have to trust you that it's going to be a good quality, and then Tom will have to do some research so I can get it put in the code correctly. Because, I mean, Tom, if I say a good quality, how is that going to be?
You can look at my last one that's in Commissioner Brown's district on 141, right across from Pinecrest. I mean, it still looks great, and I'm pouring more money into them, you know, just to keep them up because I want them to look good. If they don't look good, then people don't want to rent
I
them.
thought it was a country club at first.
I'm sorry?
I thought it was a country club at first.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
Charles, I do have a question about your outlot. I know you've let the sheriff's office use it, you said, for a SWAT.
The SWAT team's been doing.
Shooting it up or
right.
Whatever, and that, but.
I'm surprised it's still standing.
And I've asked, you're going to.
Once you give me, well, the county gives me my permits, with a land disturbance permit, I can do something about it.
Okay.
Without that, I can't do anything.
I just don't want to have to bring a thing saying it needs to be torn down.
No, it's going to be torn down.
Okay.
So.
I mean, it looks horrible, as you can imagine.
I first got addressed when we had the trailer and the trash out there, and we cleaned all that up, so.
This is going to be an improvement.
Absolutely.
It better be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Y'all have any other questions about those other?
The only other question that I had with them, just so the board knows, this shares a property line with Coal Mountain Elementary. I know Tim was here, and it is, they're going to landscape that. There will also be a fence. So there is, you know, there's a 40-foot buffer, and there's also going to be, it'll be there's existing trees standing, and there's also going to be
landscapers right here. He will be.
There'll be trees that will be added.
That's right.
As well, so it'll be pleasant to view, and the kids won't be able to get into it. So that was something else I'd looked at.
Are any of those roll-up doors facing the school?
No.
Sorry?
All of the roll-up doors are in the interior.
They're inside.
None of them are outside facing the school or anything like that. You've got it all in internal, or the street. They're all internally to the alleyways.
I believe one building at the back is facing the back property line, but the rest of them all face in.
What kind of property is that adjacent to?
The
residential, ag,
well, we've got a
commercial?
huge buffer back there because of the stream that runs back there.
So it's not going to be visible from the adjacent property?
Have you got a planting along the back? I mean, will it open up to North Forsyth High School there on the back?
I'm not sure. I'd have to pull the landscaping plan. I just know that sewer run is.
Do we have that in the
there.
packet? I didn't see it in all the various illustrations we have. Do you have something we could look at, the landscape plan for that? Look at those pictures you weren't showing us. So this is the rear of the property here to the right that we're talking about, the buffer. Is that a planted buffer or existing buffer, combination thereof?
There is, yeah, it's a planted buffer. This is to the right, it would be towards the east, towards the Coal Mountain Elementary. So
Okay.
I was more concerned with including that.
Right.
As that was the topic of conversation. So I wanted to be able to show that. Let me see.
Commissioner Mills had
Yeah, but
asked
the
about
back
the
is
back
here.
for north.
This is North High.
Right.
But, yeah, as, yeah, there is a large stream located
It's
to
a
the rear of the property.
Big divide.
Okay.
Can you tell, is there a lot of trees already back there
Yes.
already? I mean, because of the stream?
I've walked it. There are a ton.
So you've got, you see that? You've got existing, look, Laura, all the,
I see it. Mm-hmm.
can you go back and show them the visual of what, I know it's not exactly what it's going to look like, but
Yeah.
And the offsets of the other
Yeah. See, this is a color rendering of the office, which will be located, which is largely brick and glass. And then
the other building that's got
yeah.
the brick.
Yeah. Let's see.
There's a large storage building along the front that's to the right of the office that has all brick and stucco. And they've got offsets with the dimensions and the projections and all of that. It's going to look really nice.
can you put your conditions back, or your variance request back up?
Yes.
And then, so Tom, on something like this, I've not done an alternate design request. I just, or Ken, just make a motion for these as presented?
As presented, that's correct. I did want to ask you, you were looking for material guidance, materials, exterior materials, and I think the reference was to a similar product in Commissioner Brown's district. Do you want to latch upon that? Because I agree with Tom, making something up on the fly is difficult, but if there's a product that does look good and you want to indicate
That'd be
that
fine.
the materials will be substantially in accordance with a similar product by this same
With the
developer in
quality of the
District
same.
2, that's something you could latch on to.
That'd be fine.
Yeah, and I will say that there are already materials that have been submitted to the planning department.
It was
along
part of
with
our
the
application for this.
But even the EFS has been submitted that
Yes.
wasn't on the list? Okay.
Yes.
And is it the same as what you used in District 2?
Yes, but it's just a different color.
Different color, same product.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just
If you want
a
Ken's
step
belt and
below.
suspenders, you could reference that development.
I can. Does it have a name, your storage thing in District 2?
The one in District 2 is Peachtree Parkway.
But does the storage, what's it
Peachtree
called?
Parkway Storage, I think is
Peachtree
what we
Parkway
call it.
Storage.
What's the street address?
What is the one that's down
You don't know your address?
across from Pinecrest?
It's Peachtree Parkway
Address.
Storage, Charles Conklin.
1030 Peachtree
There
Parkway.
you go. Then that'll give you a specific property to reference.
All right. Is there anything else?
I don't have anything else.
I make a motion to approve the alternate design request as presented in relation to 3530 Matt Highway LLC, parcels 190036190-218, with item number 1, applicant requests to use EFS as a building material comparable to that used at Peachtree Parkway Storage, owner Charles Conklin. Is that okay?
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
Paul, you have to stay till the end.
Public hearing number 4, and as we mentioned earlier, we're not going to be deciding this issue tonight, but we will hold a public hearing for anyone who wants to speak to it.
AZ 190018, located in Commission District Number 5. It's a public hearing for Yard Mutts LLC regarding the amendment of condition number 12 placed on zoning application 2973. As you identified at the start of the meeting, The property has an associated conditional use permit application, CP 190024. It's not on today's agenda, but it is scheduled for the September 19th BOC meeting.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Anybody who are to speak in favor, please come forward. Mr. Light.
Good evening, Commissioners. Christopher Light with Lipscomb Johnson here on behalf of Yard Mutts. As Mr. Brown was stated, this property is currently zoned CBD. It's in District 5. It's in the northern point of District 5 on 306, just west of the east of the Publix there. This property was zoned in 2004 along with the property to the southwest with it. It was a 5-acre total zoning. It was zoned for a feed and grain store and fish supply. It ended up being Rucker Pet, and I believe there's a Anytime Fitness and possibly I shouldn't say, something else coming on the lot right beside it. Parcel direct to the east of it, the small parcel you see there, CBD, was owned in 2016. The M1 parcel behind this property was owned in 88, and there is an A1 piece also connected to it, and that's going to be a big focus of this request. As you can see, this area, you all know this area has changed a lot since 2004 when this property was initially zoned. The properties to the east of us have residential homes on them now that are vacant, and my understanding is they are dilapidated and in need of repair. The likelihood of the A1 piece to the east of us that it will go to commercial is pretty high, I would say. In any planning tools, this is in the Hammonds Crossing development node, which does call for that along these arterial roads. With a widening to 369 and improvements to 306, I think that highest and best use certainly could be argued that it will be a commercial use. The house on the A1 property is approximately 170 feet from our property line as well. I have not heard from the property owners of either one of these for this application or for the conditional use permit. No one showed up for our public participation meeting. This is showing you essentially what we're requesting. We have the conditional use permit for a kennel and outdoor play. Right now we have a kennel for indoor and have had one for a long time. The outdoor play area would be in the shaded areas that you see on this site plan. The conditional use permit and the zoning adjacent to other commercial zonings would only require a 10-foot landscape strip. So in the conditional use permit, we have, beside the A1 piece, it requires a 40-foot buffer. So we have requested in the conditional use permit a variance to that buffer down to the 10 feet, but to keep it a buffer, because the buffer requirements for planting of trees is higher than just a 10-foot landscape strip, even though eventually it could probably be commercial and only require the landscape strip. There is also an 8-foot fence at the property currently. The plan would be to take the 8-foot fence and bring it inside the property line and plant the trees on the outside along the adjacent property line, and they could be evergreen to the county arborist standards liking. The conditional use permit was recommended approval by staff, and also the Planning Commission, it has been to them with the variances. Planning Commission District 5 member did come out to the property and gave glowing reviews. I would invite each and one of y'all. This is a very nice kennel and dog area. They do training. They do a daycare during the day, and it's very, very nice. Here's the language we're requesting. Essentially what we're requesting is to be in line with what is required and adjacent to commercial properties. We're asking the condition be changed to to line up more with the code for this area in orange, if that were a commercial property. When this was zoned in 2004, it was a different area, and I can understand a large building coming in being a concern. Now this area has changed. I think we haven't had any code enforcement violations, no calls or anybody out there. So we're asking for that to go down to 10 feet from 40 feet in that area. And that's the zoning condition amendment, which would align with what the request is in the conditional use permit. So yeah, basically because of the changes in the area over the last decade and the likelihood of the A1 property eventually becoming commercial, we feel this is a reasonable request at this time that would allow this extra space for the outside play area for the dogs. And here's where they're at now, indoor. And it's a great facility. It's clean. I invite any one of y'all that would like to come peruse and check it out to come. With that, I'll reserve the rest of my time and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. We're now closed. Is the facility, is it just adjacent to, or is it actually associated with Hollywood Feed? Who is the?
Good question. So,
Rucker?
the Ruckers still own the building, but they sold the business to Hollywood Feed. So the Hollywood Feed is in the front 7,000 square feet, and the doggy daycare, currently Yard Mutts, is occupying the back 7,700 square feet.
By the Rucker family still, so they're separate operations?
Well, Rucker still owns the building, and he
Okay.
rents to Hollywood Feed, and then he'll rent to Yard Mutts.
Okay, so Yard Mutts is yet a third party in that?
Yes.
scenario.
Abby Freeman is the principal.
Okay.
She's couldn't be here tonight, but she is the principal, and she'll be here at the conditional use permit time.
How many mutts does she allow in there?
She's one of those people, she loves them. So she was like, well, they're wanting to restrict. She's like, I want 10,000. You know, she wants all of them. But you got to remember, this isn't like Fur Kids where it's a take drop-offs and stuff. This is a no-bark facility. They train. They take dogs that they want to take. Right now, they have around 30 or 40 inside. They have capacity for the kennel space to have 75, and that's what the Planning Commission limited to.
In the cup?
In the cup, correct.
Can you just educate me on how can you have a no-bark facility? What is that?
So this is it's a policy more. They train to no bark, and then there's a condition in the conditional use permit for if there is a dog barking outside, it must be immediately brought inside, and also their internal policy, which is outlined also in the conditions in the conditional use permit, that any dog that they have a problem with the continuous barking of is not allowed to come back to doggy daycare or to stay overnight at the kennel. It's expelled from school.
They're not
certainly.
taking,
Yeah.
they're not
And they
taking
don't-
my Frenchie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board on this application? Like I said, it will be cycling back around alongside its cup. But if you have a burning question tonight, please ask. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move on. Just for everyone's reminder, we will be hearing this on the 19th as old business. Thank you. Moving along, public hearing number 5 was postponed until October 3rd, which brings us to public hearing number 6. Vanessa.
Good evening. This is a draft change to Chapter 8, and it pertains to sketch plat. And I just have a single slide, if we could pull that up. So this would pertain to what would trigger a sketch plat application. We are currently suggesting that the threshold be reduced from a 5-acre minimum to 2-acre. That would mean, anything 2 acres or above that had significant changes to the site plan layout formally approved by the board would have to come back for board approval. And we have also added a trigger for anything that involves open display of merchandise, outside storage, or a non-residential building expansion. If any of those 3 items have an increase of 10% or greater from the original approval, that would also trigger the sketch plat. But again, it would have to be a site that would be at least 2 acres in size. So these are the modifications that were discussed in former work sessions. It has been brought up before the Planning Commission. This is the second public hearing, so the board is free to consider adoption. And if we could, Susan, can we just briefly show the draft? It's a very simple draft, but I do want to put that on the screen for anyone in the audience who wishes to see it. And I'm certainly available for any questions after the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second, please vote. We're open with a vote of 5-0. Is there anyone who is here to speak in favor of these revisions? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, please vote. We're now closed.
Madam Chair and board members, I have a comment, if I can, about this.
Rock and roll.
So, as y'all are, I know that you're going to have another public hearing on this, or is this the last one this evening?
This is the
All right.
second.
So, I wanted to mention to you, though, whether the board would consider an economic development aspect of this. One of the things I had discussed with Vivian was the notion of whether, if a project is considered a bona fide economic development project, you know, we have those defined in one of our codes, if you would want to consider an exemption to those sorts of projects to act as an inducement, that it could in fact be allowed to skip the sketch plat process. Otherwise, we'd have to follow all the permitting requirements, but it would bypass sketch plat if there is a finding of a bona fide economic development opportunity that exists.
And I think that's a good catch. I mean, we've in the way that we've captured that elsewhere to allow for that carve out.
It's one more arrow.
It's one more tool, right? And I would, you know, certainly appreciate the guidance on how we include that.
I think it's a good idea if
properly.
it meets what we're looking for.
And the key is, you know, because we came up against this with the affidavit issue on our transparency, was one place where it came up earlier, and we had to kind of put our focus on what the carve out was, and that bona fide status that they're actually working on an economic development
And the beauty of it
project.
is because we have all that defined in our economic development ordinance now, that makes it a nice concrete definition. So there's not going to be any ambiguity in that.
Right. It's all.
And it has to be bona fide. So I've drafted some language, but to be candid, given that would be a fairly significant change, we need to do one more of these in October. But the language would simply be that a sketch plat shall not be required if proposed land development is declared a targeted business or extraordinary project as defined and authorized by Section 22-256 of the County Code, and if the Board of Commissioners ratifies this declaration and authorizes such development to be exempted from the sketch plat process.
I like that idea, and I would like to see this come back then for another public hearing on October 3rd. So that's my motion, is to go ahead and do a punt on this. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And we will see this again on October 3rd with the revised language as discussed. Any further comments or questions from us before we move on? All right. Public hearing number 7.
Good evening. The second set of changes are for Chapter 11. If we could pull up the draft, and if you can scroll it down to the first edition, first edit. So we, of course, went through a countywide residential standard adoption on June 6th, and since that time, there have been questions about applicability. We are going to be refining what triggers compliance with these standards. So what I'd like to do is I want to walk through this draft very briefly. Some of these items are simply a formatting change in the movement of language and are not content-based, so I would like to highlight it. So under 11-9.2a, this is not new content. We simply have moved language around, so we're not changing what you formally adopted before. Under C, we have struck a clause, but it doesn't actually change the intent of what we sought. It simply means that if there's damage to a structure that's currently, whether it's a residence, detached garage, that for it to be rebuilt, it can be rebuilt the way it was. It doesn't have to then comply with the new standards. So striking this clause makes that more clear. If we go down to E, this is where the content begins to change. What the change would result in is we would only require compliance with new phases, so not lots within existing phases. That has been struck for both major subdivisions and minor subdivisions. In addition, we do have an exemption clause for a final phase. So a final phase could be a new phase, but if it's part of a development that is under one zoning application, one approval, and 90% of the previous phases have received a CO, then that final phase can be built according to the standards that were part of the rest of the development. So again, this is in keeping with board conversation and direction. This is simply codifying it. If we move down to F, again, that's just, again, striking the platted lots within minor subdivisions. Under 11-9.3, and we would have to go to the second page, all of these changes are simply a format change. There's no change in content. Under 11-9.4, building materials, again, there is no content change. If we can go to the last page of the draft. Under tree planting, this actually mirrors the language that you just saw in the tree ordinance. There was concern about, again, proper placement of trees, making sure that there's adequate growing medium. So as the tree matures and the roots grow and the canopy enlarges, we can ensure that that tree isn't going to cause disruption of, breaking up the driveway, breaking up a potential sidewalk, that it has enough room to grow. The second part, again, also in the tree ordinance, is if it is clear that before the tree is even installed at the landscape plan stage, if there needs to be an adjustment, the arborist does have discretion in terms of the species choice. And that might be the best solution in that circumstance, that from the beginning you decide to make a change so you don't create a problem in the future. So we have put this in Chapter 11, and again, it's going to be mirrored in the tree ordinance. So we really have coverage not just for the residential districts in 11 and the countywide, so that's Res 2, 3, and 4, but we would then carry it over for the tree ordinance across all districts. I can certainly answer any questions, but that, again, represents the changes before you tonight, and you can move to adopt if you desire. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. We're open with a vote of 5-0. Anyone who's here to speak in favor, please come forward. I see Mr. Winterstein is moving towards us.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm Kirk Winterstein. This is what I believe. I have been exposed to this before, and most of this is just moderate housekeeping. And then again, we don't want to force people to plant trees where we know they're going to create a problem later on. So this is moderate housekeeping, which is a good thing, and we're going to help prevent people from having problems with trees later on. I speak in favor, Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of these changes or clarifications? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please vote. We are now closed with a vote of 5-0. Any discussion amongst the board on this item? I think these are sensible clarifications and guidelines. Would anyone like to offer a motion on this?
Make a motion we approve. Make a motion we approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Thank you. Item number 8, Sharon Farrell. We don't get a lot of Sharon Farrell in these meetings. Big night. Every once in a while you come see us.
Not often enough. I'm sure you recall a few weeks ago there was discussion regarding enlarged signage for home occupation. So tonight's public hearing is the modification to the UDC Chapter 16 regarding the allowable signage for home occupations. In May, the board directed staff to provide the path for those folks to have the ability for additional signage beyond the 2 square feet that's currently allowed. The code change provides for a 6-foot-high, 16-square-foot sign in either a monument or a monument blade style. There's a fairly rudimentary graphic in your agenda packet. On July 30th, the Planning Commission voted approval for the code modification with no amendment to the language. Attached in your backup, you also have a map that depicts 11, well, it's actually 12 locations that would qualify for this increased signage.
They required to call it a hop in your drawings.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second.
My motion is second. Please vote. We're now open, and we may have some more questions for you. Is there anyone who's here to speak in favor? Thought you might. If you can go ahead and give us your name and.
Hey y'all, I'm Dawn Felidi. I'm here speaking in approval of this. I've talked to all of you before. I'm one of the homeowners that would be, this would apply to me. I would love to see that map that shows all 12 of those, because I did a lot of research. I couldn't find more than 5. So I would love to see that if I can see that. But I'm just here to say yes, let's do it. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I think it's good for business and it's good for the county, and I don't see any downside. But I'm happy to answer questions if y'all have any questions about from the
After we
homeowner.
close the public hearing, we might.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of this revision? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote. And we're closed. Commissioner Brown? Did we capture your vote? I don't think we did. You want to relight the board and allow Commissioner Brown to cast his vote? Everybody can recast, I guess.
Thought I did.
There we go, and it passes with a motion of 5-0 to close the public hearing and enter into discussion. Commissioner Brown, I know you've worked with Ms. Felidi on this a bit. I've definitely had conversations with her as well, or at least some email exchanges.
Yeah, I think this is a good, especially the quality monument type signs we're talking about. So I'm ready for a motion.
Just to clarify that the way that these 12 sites were identified was within the constraints of how we've captured this, which is along arterials.
Major.
Yeah, major arterials, and not within subdivisions and some of the other controls that you might.
As a matter of fact, there's other signage that is commercial in nature that's along the same corridors, and I just thought
on a CBD lot or a
yeah,
commercial lot?
like churches and things that are similar, in a lot of cases a lot larger than this would be, and I just think it's give them parity with existing signage.
Are there any other questions from the board? Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Felidi or for staff? Commissioner Brown, I'll let you take lead on this.
I'd like to move that we approve the proposed UDC modifications relating to home occupation permitted signage as presented in our book and as briefed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Thank you. Public hearing number 9.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. I have before you tonight 3 proposed amendments to the UDC. These were originally brought before you back in June at your work session and are the result of continuous dialogue we've had with our business and development community. The 3 proposed amendments tonight are related to expiration of land disturbance plan review periods, extended vested rights for specific industrial projects, and the reestablishment of nonconforming uses. We'll start with the expiration of the land disturbance period. First, we need to understand what our land disturbance period is and how this process works. When you submit for a land disturbance plan, when you submit your plan for review for your permit, you have 12 months to have that plan approved. If within 12 months it's not approved, the plan expires and you have to resubmit and start the process over. Now, the staff understands that there are various external factors that can cause a plan review to expire. And in certain situations, the timing for a resolution is uncontrollable, despite the applicant's best efforts. And a couple of examples of these are when applicant needs to obtain a private easement, such as a sewer easement from a neighboring property, or if there's a public road project and they're waiting for DOT to give them right-of-way plans so they can design their project appropriately. So the staff took some things into consideration and have a recommendation that's before you tonight. The staff recommends that we keep this 12-month process, but that we allow for the director to approve extensions with discretion on a case-by-case basis. And for these, we would require justification. Now, the way this draft is written is pretty open-ended, and we left it that way because we're not sure exactly what we're going to get, and we want to make sure that we have the flexibility to work with each individual case. There are some things that we'll need to consider, and the Planning Commission had some great questions about what will we take into consideration. So before you on the screen there's a couple of our different considerations that the department will consider when looking at these extensions. Basically what we're trying to make sure is that they're working towards a resolution, and that if we grant an extension, that we're keeping them on pace, we're reviewing them, and we're setting a time for that extension that is appropriate for whatever their issue happens to be. This is the specific draft language, and all we're doing here is adding in that the director may grant that extension of the plan review period based on documented justification. And moving on to our second proposed amendment tonight, this deals with extended vested rights for specific industrial projects. And what we're talking about here is essentially industrial parks. What staff's understanding of this issue here is that, and from what we've heard from the development community, is that multi-phase industrial projects, they may take several years to develop. They're usually graded, the roads put in utilities, but then the buildings are built specifically for certain end users. These projects can take up to 5 years or longer to develop. Our UDC right now allows for an 18-month period in which you're vested under the code as it was at the time of rezoning. Once you get past 18 months, you revert to the code as it is today, and there is concern amongst the development community that changes to the code, as frequent as they are, could potentially cause a problem. And this has led to investors shying away from larger industrial park projects here in the county. Planning staff recommendation for this one is that we want to single out our industrial projects over 10 acres. This is within the M1 and M2 districts. We want to recommend to allow 5 years of investment in the code, and then we also, through this proposed amendments tonight, protect those developments from the automatic county initiating zoning that can happen at the end of 18 months. So we've got the two languages here. First to Chapter 8. This is the one specifically dealing with the investment in the code under 18 months. And all we've done here is we've added a time period maybe increased by the director, maximum of 5 years for those projects over 10 acres upon showing that the development is progressing. The second code language here, this is the section of the code that deals with that automatic, the automatic clause that comes back before you for rezoning potentially at 18 months. And we've put sort of the same language in there to protect these specific types of developments. The third amendment that I have before you tonight, this actually came from the board at the work session, and this one deals with our reestablishment of nonconforming uses. Excuse me. A little bit about our code history from 2000 to 2004. The code allowed for 6 months for the reestablishment of a use, and then from 2004 to present, it's currently set at 60 days. I want to explain just a little bit about the current framework and how it works when we try to determine when a use has been discontinued. Right now, our business licenses are valid for the calendar year, January 1st to December 31st. So no matter when in 2019 you apply and receive a business license, it's going to expire at the end of this calendar year. We do have a grace period for renewals. We allow until March 31st for the 2020 renewals. And on top of that, our businesses don't need to notify us. Well, excuse me, they don't usually notify us when they close or depart the county. And so just an example of what this can mean for us is that the department may not realize that a business is gone or use has been discontinued until after March 31st of the following year. So you potentially could say a business that has an active license today could close their doors tomorrow, and we really wouldn't have any idea until March 31st of next year to say, okay, they're definitely out of business and not coming back. And that's 6 months, a lot greater than the 60 days. So there are some challenges we've heard from property owners and management regarding the 60 days and trying to get a site ready for another user. So just kind of some of the challenges up here on the board. A lot of times you might have a use that's really been developed and a building built for a very specific use, and trying to find a new user can be cost prohibitive if you have to retrofit that building for a different tenant. On top of that, if a tenant leaves, you're going to have to remodel that building, possibly clean up the site. You have to market it, and then you have to enter that lease agreement. And from what we've heard from the business community is that can take well over 60 days. So this is the language. It's very simple, crossing out 60 days and going to 12 months. And this is what we started with, the direction we got from the board back at the June work session. The Planning Commission, they recommended 6 months, and this was their only change to the 3 codes changes that you see in front of you tonight. They recommended unanimously the first 2 and the 6 months on this one. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing then. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Move.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And we're open. If there's anyone who is here to speak in favor of these new provisions, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Steele. I'm a policy analyst with the Council for Quality Growth. Thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished commissioners, for allowing me to speak. We respectfully request for the board to approve the land disturbance permit plan review extension amendment. As Jerry just said, developers deal with issues sometimes beyond their control that can cause the plan review to take longer than 12 months to complete. And we also want to thank Tom and Jerry with the planning department. They've been incredibly forthcoming with our members to share information about the county's proposed UDC changes and been receptive to our members' feedback to the business in Forsyth. So, you know, we stand ready to continue to serve as a resource to the county to incorporate policies that lead to quality residential development within the county, and we ask for your favorable support for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition to these proposals? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, please vote. We're closed with a vote of 5-0. I kind of formulated a couple questions myself here, so I'm going to go ahead and ask them. The open-endedness of and giving the director the discretion to allow that to continue, would it not make sense to put some sort of a number, a value on that of what the extension may be granted? Otherwise, if something continues to kind of wane on the vine and the director is not following that with some specified follow-up period, we could find ourselves 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road with something that just really never was resolved. And I have that concern with leaving that open-endedness on there, that we probably should assign some numerical value to that, just so there is some sort of a check-in period that they decide at that time to use as a discretion again, whether it should have another extension.
Absolutely, it's a good consideration. Internally, we thought 6 months would be the maximum that we would possibly approve for. Now, of course, we're open. We don't know what we're going to get. We don't know what type of trouble somebody may run into that
Right.
has legitimate concern. Now, we could do any period of time, and if it expires, there's the way it's written, there's no
You do it
reason
again.
why we could not do another one.
Right, and I think that might be, in order to keep kind of track of things in the hopper and not allow them to kind of just fall off the radar, that would be something that I would be interested in seeing. This doesn't necessarily mean somebody's not going to get that additional punt, but at least keeps it kind of on the radar. And that kind of leads into my second concern with it too, was with the 18-month automatic clause. Should we not have some sort of progress that as we do with the other properties? Because I can see we're an M1 or an M2, while we want to encourage them to have a longer runway to try to build out and get their projects rolling. Those can also be the very types of projects that may end up, if there's no activity on them for an extended period of time, may be ones that it really does not fit a current comp plan in a future date if someone does not exercise the zoning that they've obtained. So I'm kind of looking for some sort of reasoning that strikes a balance there, that they can continue to have that longer runway to build, but it's still going to require some sort of interaction or progress being made on that with that same 18-month or whatever else is appropriate time frame. I just, I can think of a couple of M1 properties, or at least one right off the top of my head, that is now in an area that we would never dream zoning it that way. And it's right in the middle of residential and retail. And
I have a question
really,
for you, Madam.
that would be one that I would just have a concern that obviously they have a different set of concerns with building out. But again, do we want to ensure that we have some sort of a regular review period that does not allow things like that to kind of sit out there and as ticking time bombs?
So how do you, just curious, and I hope I heard your comments correctly, and you're right, they sit around forever. I've got ones that are at least 20, 25, possibly 30 years old, and I'm thinking of 3 separate ones. Penley Park, Highway 9, north, the one that runs by Walmart's another one. And one of them is, I guess it's an M2, heavy industrial in the back. Then a couple of lots of light industrial and the front lots became commercial, which makes a lot of sense as they get to Highway 9, actually. But they have a few people that start in the back, and it's an industrial park, period, the end. What would you want to revalue it at later?
I don't know.
How do you redo that?
Well, but see, there's where you're talking about a situation where there has been progress. That's a different.
Yeah, so
I'm talking about a completely
nothing, not even one building is built?
unexecuted, right, because we do have that provision now that things come in for a review and the potential for a county-initiated rezoning after 18 months. Doesn't mean that they're going to get there. We may keep them where they are, we may not, but.
I guess my point was, if they've started anything at all, do we then
Well, that's-
leave them alone?
And that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at. Can we set some parameters that there's got to be some sort of performance moving that forward, that it's not just a stagnant, because I understand completely that
something in
the
what you're
development
zoned
process
for.
may be different for those types of properties, and certainly we don't want to hinder that type of investment. But on the other hand, if there's been no motion, if there's been no action, again,
And what we
may
heard,
find ourselves outside of the current comp plan at some future date. So I just really am not looking to undo what's being proposed here. I just want to kind of set some expectations of a regular review period so that things aren't kind of going off.
I would certainly say this, that a lot of things that we keep referring to happened so long ago before this county really started to show its true colors and what it was going to become, that our last, and it was tremendous work, but I think it was 40,000 people put input on the comprehensive plan. I don't know that we'll see those kind of issues ever again, putting things where they don't belong, at least as much as what we've seen in the past.
And that may be the case, but we are that board 20 years later that they're looking back to at the decisions that we made. And so it's,
No,
if,
No, I
all I'm
I
asking
get
for is an
that.
update. I'm looking just to make sure that,
I got
that
you.
there is
I
some
got
regular
you.
period that we're making sure that this is still in conformity with what our comprehensive plan is looking for. And it's possible, 5 years, 10 years goes in the blink of an eye.
So
if
what?
I can
So
I offer
but
just one comment? I mean, Todd and I have sat on this committee for 2 years.
Yeah, we did.
With the developers, and we're trying to balance a tax base that's been overrun with residential.
I agree.
And they are Dennis Powell, and I mean, we could go, there's been 5 or 6 people that have worked in this commercial and industrial industry. And what they've said repeatedly, and these are mainly for industrial parks.
Right.
And what they have said is they can't come here, or they lack wanting to come here because of the lack of stability.
Right. I
And
get
because of this ever-changing Board of Commissioners that have had, if you back up, how many changes since 2014? 35 changes in the UDC since 2014, which equates to, we can't do business here because we don't know what the next board's going to do.
And
we
they're
have no,
scared to
just
death
let me
to-
talk for
they're
1
scared to
second.
death.
Just 1 second, let me get this out. And so they want stability in what they're going to do. And so they are wanting us to put something in place that will give them the ability to go borrow large sums of money and to give them, because what's happened before is the residential comes sweeping in behind them. And once those people get here, they don't want this commercial. And the board will get in place, and the voters will start putting pressure on the board not to let this happen. And then the board will succumb, and the businesses won't get to come. And so they're wanting some assurance of stability from us to say, yes, we will stand behind you. We will help do our tax base, and we're going to give you this 5 years so you can go out and borrow this large sum of money, and you can make this investment in this 25 or 30 acres, and you'll be able to come in and put this large investment into place. One of them's having to run $1 million worth of sewer across 400 to be able to do it, and that's all they're asking for.
And their bank will not loan them the money unless they see that that can actually happen.
Exactly.
It's not going to be, the rug's not pulled out from under.
Exactly.
Like I said, I'm not.
And
at
this is
all-
why we're so short in industrial buildings in our county right now, way
And
short
I'm not,
of.
and to repeat, I am not at all trying to undo any of this. I'm just trying to make sure that there's some way that we have these projects on the radar. I'm not saying that they don't.
For what reason,
get that
though?
Because if something doesn't happen for an elongated period of time and it no longer fits the comp plan, then we have issues. So I'm just trying to give us the flexibility and give them the assurance and the, the commercial development community, the confidence that they need to be able to do this. But I want to make sure that we don't find ourselves with something that just kind of disappears because there's been no progress on it, and at a future date, other landowners in the area have invested in improving their property to a different standard, and then now they are still, now there's something that hasn't been monitored.
But this would have been zoned. If anybody else came there and did something to do something different to a different standard, this still would have been zoned. And in Georgia law, buyer beware, they should have done their due diligence to know that it's there.
Right.
But if you have 5 years, I would think that you're correct. They need to have something put in place. But once they have one building built, you can't go back
Well,
and
no,
change
and that's what I'm
that.
getting at. If there's a progress marker, I'm cool with it.
We're done,
That's what
okay.
I'm saying. I just want to see if
And can we have
there's
them give
some
them at
way we
least
can
5
tie
years? I
it
mean, at least
to
5
some
years.
sort of progress marker.
All
And
right.
whether it's pulling an LDP land, whether it's investing in sewer, there are things, tangible things that we can say, obviously, they are working towards executing the zoning that they have received.
If they build that one
So,
lot.
and some sort of an update of
But
where they are.
but if they are on 400
My annual
and
forget
they
5
are going
years.
to put if we want them to be M1 along 400, and that's what's shown in the comp plan, I like letting them know that we've got faith that that's what we want it to be there too.
Well, right, but, we
So
also.
tell me what you think, Commissioner Mills, about like an annual update, just where you stand right now.
I mean, I like what
Didn't
they've
know what-
proposed. I like what they've agreed to
Give
do.
them them their 5 years, and then we get our annual updates, and we see if we want to do something with it. But
I mean,
to be on
most-
their back every single year while they're just going through their loan processes, and the
I-
first year they're
maybe
not
it's
going to
a
get
year.
anything
I'm
done.
not suggesting this here. I'm just saying, how do we ensure that things do have some sort of a recheck to make sure that everything's still moving along? Honestly, whether it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, listen, if whatever that may be, they may be able to, by checking in with a kind of a progress with staff that we could help them with to get beyond. You don't know that. So
I just don't know many people that go out there and invest large sums of money. When
That
you
don't
sit
know how
and
to do
talk
this
to a
on their
Dennis
own. They don't
Powell
need
or
our
you
help.
talk to them, they don't have a lot of people that go in and put resources into an industrial facility and know they've got to run all this water and all this, roads and everything else, and they just do it to sit on it for 20 years.
No, they can't. The interest will kill them.
It will kill them.
But
The
as you
interest will put them
heard-
out of business.
as you heard, Jerry said they had anticipated that there would be some sort of a check-in period, and it had been bounced around between, what'd you say, 6 months was one recommendation and a year was the other?
Yes, correct, for the land disturbance
For the
plan.
land disturbance portion. So I'm saying, this is not something I'm just pulling from outer space. This is something that they've actually discussed amongst themselves of how do you, set an expectation that works for both sides of the equation.
Well, we don't redo our comp plan typically. Well, the state asks
Every
you to do
5
it.
years.
The state asks you to do it every 10, but this
do it
last
5.
time we backed up to 5. So 5 seems like a very reasonable time frame to get them to get something done, or we take a look at them, we get our update.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So this language, I think, parrots, in some respects, some language we've used elsewhere in the code?
I'm not aware of that.
Oh, okay. I thought that it was using that, because the reason I'm getting to that is because the notion of commenced development, I thought in another section of the code in the residential context, we talk about commencement of development being the submittal of an application for a land disturbance permit.
Yes, and that is correct. The two sections that we're looking at, both in 8 and 10, they're 18-month time period, but the goalpost is different in each one. In this first one, where we're talking about essentially vestment in the code, you have 18 months in which to receive your land disturbance permit. That means go through the plan process and be approved and receive your permit. If you've done that under 18 months, then we're good. It doesn't matter anymore. You've received your permit. The second section, this is also an 8. This is the one about the automatic rezoning. And in this one, specifically, the goalpost is you just have to submit an application for a land disturbance permit. So there's no requirement necessarily that it's approved or you get your plan approved. So they're different in each one. And so what the language that we've written, this again is director discretion, and this is for up to 5 years. So we've set a limit, unlike the first change we talked about, where it could essentially could be limitless as they're going along. As long as they're making process, we could give them continuous extensions in theory.
But there wasn't any first number to
Correct.
set that forth, and that's what I was getting at.
Yes.
It's very,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry, forgive me.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I guess it's the fact this goes on, doesn't it? You don't have the full language of the full text. That's what's throwing me off.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do not. It's in their package
Okay.
for space considerations.
So in the next sentences, it talks about, for purposes of this section, commencement of development means this.
Okay.
So it's not open-ended. There is a trigger from the standpoint of the affirmation of moving forward is the dropping of bona fide plans into the hopper of the
18 months.
county. So that to me does in fact, now the only thing that is curious to me that, and again, this is just me thinking as in the Civil Practice Act as an attorney, typically when you ask for an extension in court, you ask for an extension before the original term expires. And I wonder if that might be an opportunity here as well. That's the only thing I could see. In other words, if I get my zoning or my land use approval and I've got an 18-month period within a potential 5-year extension, do I need to make my ask during the 18 months? In other words, I can't wait to 3 years after and come in and say, hey, can I get the additional time? That's the only thing I could see that might be a check as well. Otherwise, this is sort of very similar to what we already have.
I'm just trying to make sure that what we're doing is something that we understand how it works and how it's going to be enforced and what our expectations are. I'm not, like I said, I am all about making sure that they have the opportunity to actually develop projects that they're proposing. I just want to make sure that things don't go off the radar as well.
I think what they think is there's so many unknowns. When they get into these industrial parks especially, they wish that it could be done in 10 years. But they get into them lots of times and they sell the first 3 buildings and then they might wait
Well, that's progress, and that's what I'm saying is like, what are we using to assess whether or not they're making progress on it?
But they might not sell the next one for 5 years.
But that's fine because they're already
once they develop
engaged
it,
in developing their project. That's
once they build the roads, I think they're good to go.
Well,
you
agreed.
can't ask me to go
And that's
backwards.
what I'm saying. If they're building out sewer, if they're building out roads, if they're starting to work,
they're good to
that's
go.
a non-issue, right? That's
And
what
he's
I'm
got that in here for 18 months. He has an 18-month hit in here already. They have to drop plans to get moving, do they not?
For all projects in the county.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, they already have to do
We
that.
allow the industrial parks to phase, though.
We do.
Yeah.
And so this would grant them an extension if warranted.
But it gets them in under whatever is the UDC is at the time they begin.
Correct.
Yes.
It makes
that's
sense.
So
true.
they're stable.
It just makes sense.
But again, I mean, to me, and again, this is my fault because I was only reading that blurb and thinking that was standalone.
Yeah, that's what we're all looking
it's
at
the
too.
full
I mean, I know it's in here,
paragraph. It is not the intention of this paragraph the receipt of a permit and accompanied by completion of work results in an entitlement to avoid future code amendments. It is rather the intention of this code that the issuance of an LDP is part of a continuous and ongoing land development process, which blends back, I think, rather nicely into
Good,
this
because
language.
that's what I'm looking for.
And it's right there. It's that has to be read together as a comprehensive paragraph.
And
So
I
that's-
apologize, that's my fault for not putting the whole.
No, that's my fault for not reading in the packet and just reading there, so.
I think it's everybody's fault for not letting him finish his presentation all the way.
I think he completed his presentation.
Jerry, what was it the
Good
planning
grief.
commission changed?
The only thing they changed was on the reestablishment of non-conforming uses to go to 6 months instead of 12.
And I think
So
the
12 was the
non-conforming use
original.
makes total sense.
Well, yeah, that was the one thing. I wasn't going to talk on the other thing, but I was going to ask about this one. So I did want to ask y'all about this. We have some experience in the county with this, and I was at least somewhat of a part of the discussion about this 60-day limitation. So here's what the law says. The law says that a legal nonconforming use, when a local jurisdiction like us puts a temporal restraint on it, like a 60-day timeline, and says if you discontinue for 60 days, what the law says is that if there is in fact a discontinuation of 60 days, that's some evidence that the use has been discontinued as set forth by the government, but you also have to delve into the intention of the owner. What was their intention? Was it their intention to abandon that use? You can have on a piece of property a discontinuation of the use with no intention to abandon that use, as we candidly saw in the Georgia Stone Buckhorn situation, where they discontinued their use as a commercial quarry for years, but continued to renew their surface mine permit and were seeking to actively market it. The point being, did they discontinue their use for 60 days? Heavens, yes. Had they intended to abandon that use? No, because that would effectively have rendered the property worthless. And so my only point is, it's hard to me, and I'm just me, the longer we can push this out, the better, because it otherwise puts us in the mental divination game of trying to figure out what the intent is. 60 days is almost, I'll say it, worthless.
Well, and that was
You
why
might
you
not even
thought a
realize
year
your
was
tenant moved out
better.
in the middle of the night.
I mean, that's why you thought a year, and that was why, when, I think Dennis Powell brought this up to you, Todd, in your district, on Piney Grove Road or somewhere, he couldn't get the plumbers in and the carpet people and everybody lined up to change out from one leasee to another in the time frame. I mean, they were so backed up from doing all these different other jobs that he couldn't get them in time to get it changed in the 60 days. Forget it. He couldn't get them in 6 months.
I mean, this is the board's call, and I'm not saying there's a legally wrong or right answer. It's a policy issue. I'm just offering up that we have struggled with interpreting this because it is difficult to figure out the intent of somebody. A year is better intent than 6 months, and 6 months is a better intent than 60 days.
So I got to tell you, some of the 60-day stuff, it's partially my fault, but I had a lot of used car dealerships we were trying to capture as they went out of business to get rid of them. And unfortunately, there's a lot of other things getting caught in it, but we knew that was the risk we had. But we need to deviate some of these, separating them. And we've done some conditional use permits pretty quickly, county initiated, to release some of the, what you might want to say, a pretty dolphin we caught in a net by accident. But I don't know. If you change to 60, I don't want to change it by a whole lot. Just on this use, yes, but we have to be very careful about some other uses.
That's fair. I understand. I understand the counterpoint. I do.
Yeah.
Well, if something that didn't require a conditional use permit prior, but then would require a conditional use permit, would it still have that same treatment?
My position would be, yeah, conditional
Yes.
use permit is just an additional use under
Yeah, I just wanted to
zoning,
hear
and
you
if you
say-
discontinue it and the code changes, then, yeah.
Did the planning commission say why 6 months?
They were just uncomfortable with 12. I don't think there was really a good reasoning why 12 was the set number to start with. And as the county attorney stated, anything better than 60 was good. And so they've
they
waited
probably-
between 6 and 12 months.
My guess would be that they would want to have non-conforming stuff roll off at a faster rate. That would be my guess.
That is correct. That was a discussion point of the point
What
of
about
60
if-
days was to get things to roll off.
Could we make it be 60, but give some discretion to the planning director?
As opposed to 6 months, as opposed to a
I mean,
year?
no, make it be 6 months,
with
but
discretion
with
for 12?
discretion for him to expand. Like if somebody came in and said that, you know, like it was a lease, you know, like the one we're talking, and they,
6 months with a 6-month extension? Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Something along
with
those
something
lines?
that could give the discretion to the planning director.
I
if
do like
something
that,
was-
Laura. That's a good idea. 6 months with up to 6-month discretion for the director. I like that.
We have in the department,
'Cause they
if
didn't have
there's a
enough to do.
use that's been in operation but doesn't have a business license, you know, in the county's eyes, well, there's no use there because our only proof is a business license.
Right.
Now, if they can provide us proof, a lease agreement that shows that, yes, they've got a tenant in there and this tenant's been active the whole time, if they can show us proof of an active tenant, then we can say, okay, go back and pay your business license and your late fees and we'll bring you up to speed. And we've done that a handful of times.
I would agree. I think there already is a lot of discretion built into the interpretation and application of this code section. I don't think we need to state it.
Okay.
We do that kind of research. We have the business owners come in. We had one where they came in and showed us, you know, the property needed a new air conditioning system, and it goes to Mr. Gerard's point of intent, and we didn't see the intent there.
I mean, if we want to try it on for size for 6 months, that is still better than 60 days. I don't want to.
The 60 days is way too tight. Any other comments or questions, recommendations from the board?
So you'll bring it back to us, Tom, if 6 months doesn't work?
Well, he'll have to use his discretion.
You're
If we give it
going
to
to
him.
hear about it directly because we have everything in our county now is just about a cup or prohibited. And those users are going to end up in front of you saying, I got knocked
The
out
non-conforming
because
ones.
six months wasn't enough. So you'll hear about it firsthand. But if I see a trend, I'll come to you as well.
Remember, this is about non-conforming use, so it should not be the usual. Right? This
Right. This is about uses that are
everybody who
illegal.
has a business license expire. This is somebody who is operating outside of what the current.
A lot of it is changes from permitted to conditional, and that
Right.
change has been the issue.
Right. So what's the pleasure of the board? Do we want to kick this around more, or are we ready to go on it?
It's okay with me.
Does anybody want to have any additional clarity on the first parts? I guess with the full language read, I think we're a little bit more satisfied with where that gets us if I'm kind of reading the room. As far as the 6 months plus 6 month extension, that strategy, does that? In lieu of the 12 months. Still gets you to 12 months, but it kind of meets you halfway with the planning commission, making sure that.
Ken, do we need to do that? And Ken, if we do that today, are we allowed to make that kind of modification?
We
without another
could,
hearing?
because it was advertised as 12 months. It's in your book
Okay,
as
good.
12
Thank
months.
you.
But given Mr. Brown's position, I think leaving it as is, and if it's not
it's
fitting the
covered.
bill, we'll bring it back to you.
Would anyone like to offer a motion on this item?
I make a motion that we approve the UDC modifications related to land disturbance permit review periods, applicability of amendments to the UDC, implications of delayed development and nonconforming uses as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And
Thank
that
you.
motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you
Terry
very
put a lot of
Thank
work
you.
into this.
On
Thank you.
On to public hearing number 10.
Yes, Madam Chairman of the board, this is the
While they're-
reading
they're
for the
waiting for
Forsyth
that.
County Speed Zone Ordinance, otherwise known as Ordinance 78, regarding a reduced speed limit from 50 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour on State Route 20, otherwise in the city of Cumming. And it was brought to us by the Georgia Department of Transportation. That is the only change to the speed zone ordinance being considered.
Do we have any discussion on this? This is your... Okay, but we'll,
Public hearing.
all right, we'll open up the public hearing.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Do I have a second? Oh, please vote. Is there anyone here tonight would like to speak in favor and opposition? to this item as presented? Seeing none, no one rushing to speak. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Moved. Second.
Please vote. And that is, Chairman Smonson is out at the moment. That's 4-0. What would be the pleasure of the board?
I have a question on why
Your-
does he make this request?
Pardon, I did.
I didn't have my microphone, I apologize. Why did the city make this request to reduce it? I mean, we're going to have, 20 is going to be widened, and I'm not sure why they're wanting to reduce the speed limit here at this.
They had, it's my understanding they had just requested it through the Department of Transportation to lower the speed limit on State Route 20 for enforcement.
No reason, just
That's all I know. It came through us. In the past, the Georgia Department of Transportation did not have to update the speed zone ordinances when they updated the speed limits on state routes. But this year and moving forward, the Department of Public Safety now requires that the radar enforcement permit has to be updated. They used to just do a paper amendment, and we never, they would copy us on it. But now, due to some clarification, I think, by state legal counsel, they have to go through the full process, the Georgia Department of Transportation.
After you pass North Corners Parkway, it goes back to 50 miles per hour going west?
Yes, it does. But under the State Route 20 widening project, it will be lowered to,
okay.
it will be lowered
Okay, thank
to
you.
45 in the future when
All right,
that's built.
thanks.
What is the pleasure of the board?
Cooper.
Let me get back to you. Okay. I make a motion that the amendment for the Forsyth County Speed Zone Ordinance, also known as Forsyth County Ordinance 78, regarding the reduced speed limit from 50 miles per hour to 45 on State Route 20, beginning at 634 west of Carla Drive to North Corners Parkway, to otherwise ratify Ordinance 78.
We have a motion to have a second?
Second.
Just to
Please.
clarify on that, and again, I know this is self-evident, but that was to approve, correct?
To approve, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I said make a motion to. Okay, I'm sorry.
We have a motion, a
Yes.
second. Please vote. And that's approved 4-0. Item number 11.
Madam Chair, board members, Vice Chair, and board members, I will take this on. This is a public hearing. Molly Eswine from my office will be making the presentation. Tonight is the second public hearing, and the board can act on this item.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this is the second public hearing on this small cell ordinance, basically. This is a follow-up to state law updates that were passed this year for small cell wireless antennas. Basically, state law, SB 66, puts in place specific requirements for the installation of these poles in the right-of-way. So this is governing any of these poles that are going in the right-of-way. It includes the application process, what the providers have to provide to the county, what we can consider, and how the approvals are made. The reason for the ordinance really is to establish the fees that are to be paid and the rates on an annual basis to be paid. And the ordinance otherwise just reflects state law. We reference the statutes specifically so that if ever state law changes, hopefully we won't have to go back and tweak the ordinance too much. But as for the fees and the rates, we did adopt the maximum amount allowed under the statutes. The other issue that's in here that is allowed by ordinance, y'all have already done, but we put it in the ordinance for good measure, and that is to require any of the providers seeking to install in the right-of-way in Forsyth County to have to meet with you 30 days prior to submitting an application. Again, y'all have already passed that as a resolution, but that is also restated in the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second, please vote.
You're not on.
Please, and that public hearing is now open with a vote of 5-0. If there's anyone who is here to speak in favor of this, please come forward at this time. If there's anyone who is here to speak in opposition to the adoption of this ordinance, please come forward. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion second, please vote. And we're closed. The vote of 5-0. Is there any discussion amongst the board on this item? Would anyone like to offer a motion?
I move that we approve the consideration of adopting ordinance 132 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. And moving on to number 12. Ken,
Madam Chair.
or is that Molly again?
Board members, right, Ms. Eswine will take public hearing number 12 as well.
Commissioners, this is a follow-up to the ordinance you just approved. Our UDC, as you know, has a telecommunications section in it, and when you all adopted the master right-of-way agreement requiring providers to enter into a master right-of-way agreement in order to install in the right-of-way before that state law came out, we updated the UDC to clarify that any right-of-way installations of these poles would be governed by that right-of-way agreement and also required that right-of-way agreement. Now that state law has passed, those right-of-way agreements that have already been entered into, which my understanding is it's just mobility, those continue to control until or unless they're terminated. Otherwise, the county can't require providers to enter into right-of-way agreements for the installation of small cells. So this is just an update to take the mandate of the right-of-way agreement out of the UDC and to reference that what will govern installations will either be the small wireless facilities ordinance that you just adopted or a right-of-way agreement as applicable.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Please vote. We are now open. Is there anyone who's here to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? And is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
And we're closed. Any discussion amongst the board or questions for Ms. Eswine? Ms. Eswine Esquire? Would anyone like to offer a motion?
Move we approve the proposed amendment to Article 2, Chapter 16 of the UDC as presented by Molly.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, please vote. It carries with a vote of 5-0. All right, we are done with public hearings. At this time, Karen's going to announce any public comment speakers that we may still have with us.
Madam Chair, we have no forms that have been submitted for the second public comment period. If anyone would like to address the board, please come forward at this time. I see none.
All righty. Moving on to old business, we have a slew of postponements. Item number one was postponed to November the 7th. Item number 2 was postponed until until September the 19th. 3 until October the 3rd, and old business number 4 was withdrawn without prejudice earlier in the meeting. Item number 5 was postponed until October the 3rd, which takes us all the way to number 6. Mr. Brown.
Yes, plat 190003 is the application. It is located in Commission District Number 1. This is a board consideration regarding sketch plat approval for the Forsyth County Board of Education to build a 213,176 square foot middle school on 45.465 acres of property currently zoned A1. The applicant's also requesting a variance to increase the maximum number of parking spaces from 188 to 258. The property is located on High Road. The public hearing was held on June 20th, 2019. And the proposed conditions are shown on the screen.
Thank you. This is not a public hearing. It is old business. So this is in District 1. I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you. If I could have Mr. Emerson and Mr. McCall, if you would like to add to it as well. I don't know if you want to be a part of it or not. Okay, thank you. Hi, how are you doing tonight?
Also have our principal from A&R Engineering who has done the second traffic study. The first one, of course, was designed just for our intersections at High Road. The second traffic study encompasses the entire length of High Road for the traffic counts and studies.
If you would please, on the traffic study, I did read it, and if you could tell me, let's talk about some of the recommendations and the conclusion of the traffic study. If we could.
Good evening. My name is Abdul. I'm here with A&R Engineering.
Hi. How are you?
Thank you. Appreciate it. So we conducted a detailed traffic study. Thank you. Just in general, we made the recommendations that both the entrances to the school property be accommodated with a left turn lane for traffic turning into the driveways, as well as a right turn lane to facilitate drivers coming in, as well as leaving the property. There'll be 2 exiting lanes for left turn and right turn. So it'll be a total of 3 lanes on the driveway. So we're doing pretty much everything that can potentially be done at both the entrances there. And then we looked at all the other entrances from subdivisions, et cetera, on Hyde Road. Given the low volume of traffic volume on Hyde Road, all those intersections during the peak times appear to be working well. The only issue that we identified was at the northern intersection of Hyde Road at State Route 20. And primarily, the situation there is that it's difficult to make a left-hand turn out of Hyde Road given the nature of State Route 20 and the amount of traffic during peak hours. And that is sort of the same story for almost every public road that comes to a highway like State Route 20 at a stop sign. It's not anything different from most other intersections. You will find most intersections similar to those already operating at level of service F. There is not much that you can do other than signalizing those intersections to help them make a left turn onto the highway without having to wait for the gap. But unfortunately, there are guidelines. Now you cannot slap a signal at every intersection.
Especially on State Road.
Right, we just cannot do that. The left turn volumes, though, turning left from Hyde Road onto State Route 20 are not heavy. They're like 20 cars in the peak hour, and yet they have to wait a little bit longer to find the gap in both the directions. The good news is, well, if there is any good news, more traffic is always, more congestion. But the school would not contribute to that problem because of where the school districts are and the county line is and everything. Not a whole lot of people, much of anybody, would really turn left there. Most of the school traffic headed north on Hyde Road will turn right on State Route 20. So right turners are relatively easy. They only have to find a gap in one direction. And so, we're not contributing to the left turners who are having the difficulty turning. Now, there is a left turn lane on Route 20 for traffic arriving to the school, which is good, and it's a very long one, so they can queue into it. So if anything that needs to be done at this point, Georgia DOT has been studying this intersection as part of the State Route 20 project, and they are proposing an R-cut at this intersection, meaning they will prohibit long-term and left turns out of here. Instead, they will force all those left turners to turn right and then make a U-turn at a very special U-turn location they're proposing to create. And that project, you all are aware of, is going to be implemented in phases, and it will likely take, 4 or 5 years, 6 years to get there. But that's under study by Georgia DOT. If there is any short-term fix that you would like to explore, what I would recommend is consider installing a short right turn lane on Hyde Road for traffic that will turn right on 20, so 1 or 2 left turners don't start to back up all the right turners. That would be a good bang for the buck kind of improvement, but it's interim until UDOT comes along and does what they want to do. But other than that intersection, really most other intersections, study shows that they will function well.
Well, and specifically to the northern and southern driveways for the school itself, I saw that it does meet the traffic volume requirements at 45 miles per hour and at 25 miles per hour. Well, let me ask you on this: are you going to change the school zone miles per hour to 25 and in the school zone? Is that?
The speed limit remains 45 miles an hour on High Road as currently posted. Our speed reduction is only 10 miles an hour. We can only reduce to 35 miles an hour in the school zone.
Okay.
Which is
During the course of your study, did you find that there were any significant factors of speed being an issue on that road, or anything that sightline issues that could potentially be reviewed for some sort of an improvement?
Okay.
Do you think of reducing the speed limit on that road to get you guys closer down to that 25 would be appropriate?
Yes.
I certainly would agree that during school times, when most school traffic is arriving and leaving, a reduction in school with school zone would be definitely appropriate, and I think school board is considering that. However, the side distance analysis at the driveway location does not show that there is any side distance issue. We can see adequate distance in both directions for school traffic, exiting traffic to see.
At 45?
Yes, at 45 as well. So we can see adequately at both school driveways. And the road's really a straight shot too. It's not too horizontal curvatures.
It's got a little bit of a rise to it,
Yeah,
though.
there's some vertical, but there's not a whole lot of horizontal to it.
Okay, also with that, what I understood in the recommendations is that there would be a right, on both the northern and the southern, a right turn, a right decel lane, as well as left turn lane, right, for both of those would be the
That is correct for both
recommendations,
the
even though it's
drivers.
not required for both from the study, but that was your recommendations from it. And my question was that with the school, if you will be doing that based on those recommendations from the traffic study, and also, if you don't mind telling me, how long did you monitor? What was the timeline on your traffic study? Was it a week, 10 days, 2 weeks?
So we did several types of counts. What we typically do for traffic impact studies, we go 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon and do manual turning movement counts, or do videos and then count it manually later, which tells us how many people are turning left, going straight, going right on all the 4 approaches of an intersection. So we did that because really the level of service and all of that is focused on the worst hour, with the premise that if worst hour works, then everything else should work. However, we also collected at several locations on Hyde Road 24-hour counts. So those are the tubes you see on the roads where we collect traffic going in both directions. And so we found that we have an average of, I think, 2,500 or something in that vicinity of daily traffic volume on Hyde Road. Yeah, about 2,400 cars a day. That was the average we found, which is pretty low for a two-lane road in terms of what it can handle. So there is a lot of room in there to be able to handle more traffic given the nature of the road. So the school would add another 2,400 cars. Let me see, to be accurate.
Well, when you're doing this study,
2,900. So you're looking at 2,400 and 2,900, but you're below $6,000 cars a day in both directions, and that is well within the capacity of a two-lane road of this type. Usually, the capacity of a two-lane road it can carry any day, 15 to 17,000 cars easily, and so this is 1/3 even after school traffic is added. So
But
the
it's still,
capacity is there.
but it's still rated an F rating.
I'm sorry?
Did you say that it still rates a level of service F on that road?
No, the road itself.
That's the intersection at 20.
Right. It's
Yeah.
just
Not
the left turn.
not the entire road.
Right. It's just the left turn from Hyde onto 20,
Okay.
but the whole section of Hyde Road is at very good level of service.
Okay.
and if you, when the school was in, this was during school time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
School was in session?
Yeah.
I was just checking, it was Wednesday, August 14th was the traffic count.
That was going to be my next question too, because obviously even though the school's not there during school years, the overall traffic picks up.
We had to wait this
Right.
late to get the traffic study.
We waited until, that's true.
Okay.
We could ask staff to look into adding a right lane at 20, working with the state, and possibly looking at lowering our speed limit from down to 40 or down to 35 to allow the school speed limit zone to be decreased even greater.
And that's one of the things that I had sent out. I had spoken to John Kennard to solicit any inputs from us for specific roads that we want to go ahead and study and look to do a kind of a bulk update to our speed ordinance.
Oh, I would love to see
So
Post
that's-
Road put down to 40 miles an hour from Highway 9 all the way to 20.
Put it in your wish list. And we're going to
Yes.
submit all of that stuff to be studied.
Yes.
Okay, any questions from other board members on this?
I know that it was, I can't remember how it was addressed or if you addressed it, but I know the community talked about sidewalks so they could walk to school, and if any of that was going to be addressed. in the plans?
We've developed the sidewalk pattern that goes to the limits of our construction, so when we get to the end of our property, it's no longer, our property is county right away, so that's where we have to stop our sidewalks.
We'll give you permission to get on our right of way if you'd like to extend it, so we don't have to pay for it.
I'm sure you would, but again, like you said, the state kind of says if we collect the tax revenues for school properties and education, we have to spend them for those two items, so.
Yes, sir.
And Tim, on this, so you guys are going to take the recommendations that were given to you from the traffic study and do the right turn decel lanes, the left turn lanes on both the southern and the northern
Yeah, we've had those in the
driveways?
plan.
That's been in the
since-
plan anyway?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was in the plan from the first study that they used to help evaluate that intersection study from Gray Consulting, and shared with A&R the same plan. So it is actually in permit review, but we do have the left turn bay for both the carpool and the buses. So northbound traffic will have a left turn center lane to get out of the throughway to turn left into school. And then we have the right turn lanes as you head southbound to turn into the carpool and bus bays. So we've widened that entire stretch in front of our property.
And then on those, are the right turn decel lanes 175 feet with a 100-foot taper?
Couldn't remember exactly what the measurements are, but there's something of that nature.
I think that's set by GDOT, so,
Okay.
okay. All right. Now, we had a resident that had some questions. Mark, I didn't know if you would like to ask, because this is part of the discussion. I knew you were here before, so let's get it all up and out.
Just for the record, restate your name when you come up. Make it easier on our clerk.
Hi, I'm Mark Redfern. I'm resident of Rosewood Lake Subdivision. First off, let me thank y'all for what you do, because if I had to sit through this every month, I don't know how I would
Twice
put
a
up
month.
with it. Twice?
And plus work sessions.
Thank you. All right. Look, I'm not here to fight the school. I mean, I love what Forsyth County does with the schools. I'm just concerned about some safety issues. There's a hill at the southern end of the property that when you crest the hill, I'm concerned that you're not going to have enough sight distance, even though the traffic study says that you would. I'm a little concerned if there's a decel lane in the center, if you widen the road a little bit so there's a decel lane that gives you a little more time, then maybe that's a good solution. The other thing we're very concerned about is if we can add the additional turn lane at Georgia 20 and Hyde Road, that will help tremendously, because that's a big bottleneck. And I don't know if it's possible, but if there's any way to do a roundabout, or consider doing a roundabout at the corner where Hyde Road and Drew Campground come together, because that's also a dangerous intersection. I know it may meet, for traffic studies, it may be functioning fine right now, but when you add the additional bus usage and traffic during peak hours, a roundabout might be a good solution. So that's all I really have to say. I just appreciate the opportunity to talk. I think the school is going to be a good addition to the community, but I just want to make sure we're addressing any safety concerns with Hyde Road, because it's a small country road. It's not, it would be great to get it widened just a little bit, but, so thank you very much.
Let me ask you this. Do you feel as though you were talking about the site view, decreasing the speed limit? Do you think that will also help? Do you think it will help as far as the safety goes?
I think so, but,
It's not everything.
Not everybody's going to adhere to the speed limit.
Yeah, but it's quick. I mean, that's something we can do.
And
I'm not saying it's the only thing, but that's something that could.
My experience, I've had a couple close calls on that hill. That's the only reason why I come to these things religiously, because I had, a couple experiences that, scared me. And, I don't want my daughter driving on that road, because she's going to go to West. And I don't want to have to worry about her driving on that road and possibly getting hit by somebody. So that's why I'm here. And I appreciate you all letting me have the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
I have a quick question for Tim Amerson. You may or may not know the answer to this. I'm just kind of curious. What, in judging in terms of car lengths, how long is a bus? is it 2 car lengths, 3 car
Bus
lengths?
is 45 feet, I believe, is the standard bus
So
length, 72 passenger bus.
3.5 car lengths roughly, as far as taking
Yeah.
up space on the road?
Yeah, the car length, 21, 22 feet is your standard car length, and then, so two cars equal one bus.
Okay. I'm just trying to get a sense of when those types of vehicles start traversing, more of those are on that road, stacking, coming in and out of the road, how that's going to impact those turn lanes and all those other kind of things.
Yeah, well, like I said, our buses will come in at arrival when they drop off students, that they'll come in
Right.
at regular.
And parents are throughout the whole period,
Yeah,
on
the
the
parents
early and the
in
late
stacking,
side.
and they're stacking and waiting
Yeah.
for doors to open, or the bell ring,
the
and
early
the kids to be
activities
released.
in the missed
But the buses in the
buses.
morning, they come in singly and drop off a bus. In the afternoon, they all come back in and they're stacked in the queue.
Mhm.
So typically what the sheriff, the resource officer will do is when the buses are loaded, they'll take all 20, 25 buses out on the road and disperse them at one time. So in the afternoon, bus dismissal is very quick. It's about 5 minutes to roll 20, 25 buses
And it's
out.
not during typical commuter traffic times as well. What is, have you guys identified whether that school is going to be an elementary 1 or elementary 2 schedule?
No, it's a middle school, so it's.
Oh, it's a middle school, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so
We're talking about high. So it's going to be the later.
Start time is 9 o'clock in the morning,
9
which is a little bit on the
Later
the
side.
peak hour.
Okay.
And then dismissal is at 4:10, which is just on the start of the PM peak.
Okay.
So we do have
For
a little
dismissal.
overlap when you
Half an
look
hour.
at those peak hours and the impact of the school with peak demand, because we do just overlap those times.
Anything else from anyone? Commissioner Cooper, what's your pleasure?
I'd like to move that we approve the sketch plat for the Forsyth County Board of Education, as well as the requested variance to the UDC 17.2.7, SP 1900003, parcel 033001.
We have a motion, a second, please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 5-0, and I think you've got a strong commitment from your board here that we're going to look at every opportunity that we have to try to improve the safety profile in that area. I know Commissioner Cooper's committed to that. I
Yes,
believe we all
absolutely.
are. So, moving along to new business, number 1. Well, look at all the stuff we postponed. It should have, well, I knew the tree ordinance would take a lot of time, and it did. And it should have.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you.
It's huge.
Excuse me. Before you is a grant. A couple weeks ago, we came to you, asked permission to put in our pre-application to GEMA for the FEMA 4400 Hazard Mitigation Program. And since then, we have received what's called a go forth letter from the state saying go ahead and put in the full application. And so we're coming to you tonight for permission to put in the full application for 3 fixed generators. You may recall previously that we asked for the 1. We also had previously, before we brought that to you several months ago, asked for also 2 additional generators for fire stations that do not have generators at them. So we were given the approval to go ahead and apply for all 3. That grant is a total of $2,022,370. Our match to that is $505,592. So that is a 75% match. FEMA paying the 75%, us paying the 25%. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the board?
Great job.
Yeah, excellent.
Move we
Senate-
approve the FEMA 4400 grant with authorization for the chairman to execute any of the documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Good work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item number 2.
Go forward. Go forth.
Go forth and prosper.
Madam Chair, board members, item number 2 is board
Like the
ratification of a
Bolton
settlement
family,
agreement
yeah.
and release of claims between Arlene Appleruth, I think it's now the estate of Dan Appleruth now, given the history of this case. This is a 2014 case, board members. and Cesar Rodriguez and Janice Rodriguez and Forsyth County. We were defendants. This was a case involving, again, the Apple Roofs. They live at 7745 Chestnut Hill Road here in Cumming, Georgia. They sued the county and the Rodriguezes. The Rodriguezes, however, lived in Glenn County, so the case actually was in Glenn County because in Georgia, where any of your defendants live, is where you can file the case. The Rodriguezes were alleged to have basically manipulated and done land disturbing activity on their property that funneled and channeled a lot of water into the Apple Roofs property. We were also named in the case because of our stormwater infrastructure and our right-of-way. The Apple Roofs ultimately settled with the Rodriguezes paying north of $100,000. Because the case was filed in Glenn County, my law office did not handle the case. It did subsequently get transferred back up to Forsyth County once the Rodriguezes had settled out, because now venue was, of course, in Forsyth now that the Glenn County folks were out. And our attorney has resolved the case for $10,000. And so it is my recommendation this evening that you all approve the release and full settlement of all claims between Forsyth County and the Apple Roofs per the release in your agenda book.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Mr. Gerard again, number 3.
Madam Chair, I would respectfully request as a procedural point of order that you move to take A, B, C, and D on gross so we can make one motion this evening.
Okay.
In gross?
Means to combine them together.
Yes, I know.
And just to kind of tee this up, this is the remaining.
I circled them all.
The
I
remaining
circled them all.
right-of-way issues that we have with the Ronald Reagan extension. Is there any further?
That's correct. I just
Okay.
need a motion to do
You just
that.
need a motion to do
So
that?
moved in
So need a
gross.
motion to do on gross first.
On gross first.
So
A motion in gross.
Do we need to
We have a
explain
motion
that
and-
to Todd again?
we have a motion and a second to address these on gross. Please vote. Okay.
Thank you, Madam
We will be
Chair.
considering
Board
them on
members,
gross.
these
I was ready
are
already.
these are 4 settlement agreements involving parcels on Ronald Reagan Boulevard. I will quickly state them for the record, and then you can make a motion to approve if that is your pleasure, and that is my recommendation. A is parcel 59B, 0.001 acres of fee simple right-of-way and 4,687.34 square feet of temporary easement in the amount of $5,510. The parcel owner is Wildbrook Homeowners Association, Inc. Parcel 60, 0.435 acres of fee simple right-of-way and 55,220.62 square feet of temporary easement in the amount of $168,090. Owners, Wildbrook Homeowners Association. Parcel 62, 0.006 acres of fee simple right-of-way and 11.595.13 square feet of temporary easement in the amount of $14,640. Owner, Wildbrook Homeowners Association. And parcel 63.013 acres of fee simple right-of-way and 2,873.37 square feet of temporary construction easement in the amount of $6,760. All of these have been discussed with the board previously. All of these settlements are within the range of authority provided to us by the board, and it is my recommendation that agenda item 3 under new business be approved.
I will make a motion to approve in gross as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And the motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Number 4.
Board members, this was actually on the agenda in another place tonight, was a zoning condition amendment involving the Hammonds. This is in fact a settlement agreement and agreement to purchase real estate involving the Hammonds. This would be a agreement to acquire parcel 66 in these particulars. 3,120.52 square feet of fee simple right-of-way, 4,072.24 square feet of temporary construction easement, and related site improvements for $82,800. And again, the recipients is Roger D. Hammond Family, LLC. Board members, we have discussed this previously. It is my recommendation the board approve and accept the agreement in your agenda package.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries 5-0. And number 5.
Madam Chair, board members, item number 5 is this is going to be a petition for certiorari brought by The Cleroses, this is a parcel of property in Commissioner Brown's district. There was an administrative appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals with respect to an administrative decision. The Zoning Board of Appeals affirmed the decision of the director, and now the Cleroses are seeking to appeal that to the Superior Court of Georgia by way of a certiorari. As part of that, there are certain documents that they ask us to ratify, to include a certiorari bond as well as a, forgive me, statement regarding payment of costs. They have asked the chairman to execute both. I am in agreement that both can be executed, but I would ask that they be approved. So my request to you is that the board approve the chairman to sign the supplemental approval of certiorari bond and supplemental payment of costs in your packet.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. The motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Number 6, which was our addition. The property of
It was.
Conley.
Madam Chair, I have handed out to you on a time-sensitive basis a resolution of condemnation related to parcel 57 on Ronald Reagan Boulevard. As mentioned during setting the agenda, the owners of that parcel are Roy M. Conley and Janice L. Conley. This is a resolution you all have approved previously, but the Conleys are represented. Their attorneys have brought some matters to our attention. Sarah Van Volkenberg in my office took another look at it and had our appraisal take a look at it. And what I'm going to tell you is what I have been instructed to tell you with respect to why we're asking you to adopt this resolution again. The county still requires 0.48 acres of fee simple right-of-way from Roy Conley and Janice Conley. The appraised value in light of this modest construction design change that we have made remains $2,000, and this resolution is being presented in an abundance of caution to reflect a slight design change and make clear that the owner has access to the property throughout construction. So, Madam Chair, it is my respectful recommendation that this latest iteration of this resolution of condemnation, as I have handed out to you, be approved.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 5-0. And we have an administrative hearing as well. Amy, if you want to preface that, and then I'm sure Ken will.
Sure. This is an administrative hearing for an alcohol license located in Commission District Number 3. It's in reference to violations of the alcohol ordinance for Tower Food Stop, LLC, doing business as Alpharetta Marathon, located at 5715 Atlanta Highway. Name licensee is Cherry Patel. In this case, an employee was issued a citation for underage alcohol sale and no employee alcohol permit. This would make it 2 violations within the 24 months.
Thank you. Ken, is this the point you want to come down and enter something into the record at
Not
this point?
on,
Not yet?
not on this. I don't handle these quite the same as the
Okay, you want me to go
massage
ahead and
parlor.
open the administrative hearing then?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a motion to open the administrative hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And we are now open. I guess if you, the licensee, are you here? Mr. Patel, you want to come forward and tell us what happened?
Good evening. I'm Cherry Patel, licensee for the Tower Food Stop, and I'm here for one of our employee violated the alcohol code, former employee actually. So we always try to educate them every quarterly. So, and we have our own handbook. So, and he still didn't check the ID. So that was we are in fault.
This is in District 3, and I think Commissioner Levent may have some relevant history with this location with previous
Yeah, but
licenses.
I think we have new owners here now, and I don't know that we've had anything there since they've taken over. Amy, can you give us some history?
The last owner, the previous owner had a violation in July of 2017. It was American Petro Investments. They had an underage alcohol sale. Mr. Patel is the new owner of Alpharetta Marathon, and he has been the owner since January. I think he took over January 1st, 2019.
2 years we had one violation because of.
So, Amy, he became the license holder as of January of this year?
That is last year.
That is correct? And tell me exactly what they received citations for.
He received, an employee received one citation for underage sale of alcohol and another citation for no employee alcohol permit. They were on the same day.
No alcohol license permit.
Right, that he didn't have a permit.
By the person that sold underage?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Patel,
Yes, sir.
I know you made the comment that you always like and have your employees do the right thing and check. However, you had an employee sitting there without a license.
Yes, sir.
Whose fault is that?
That's my fault, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I understand that.
Thank you. We don't normally ding very hard on the license part, but we do on the underage. But he's never been in front of us before. And it has been our standard policy on their first time, even on the underage, to consider mitigating circumstances. I've heard rumor that you are selling your business, or is that not true?
We are working on it right now.
Okay.
Do you have other locations here in the county that you have an alcohol license for?
Not in Forsyth County. We have
Okay.
a few in the Marietta. We've been owning from 10, 15 years. We never had any violations over there.
Okay, always the first time.
Yeah.
Commissioner
So-
Levant, just very quickly as a point of order, if and when you have finished with this individual, we will need to close the hearing.
The hearing. I got you. Thank you, sir. Unless anybody else,
Yeah,
I'm
we're
done.
diving right in.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anybody else who's here to speak to this issue? Do we want to have our Leos come forward? That would be great. Thank you. You can go ahead and take a seat, and then we'll close the hearing and go into more discussion.
So this was an undercover alcohol buy. We sent a plainclothes deputy in. This deputy was able to purchase alcohol. She was not asked to present ID. It's pretty straightforward to my knowledge. The permit had expired recently within the past 72 hours, but the sale was without identification.
So he had a permit, it just
It was expired.
was expired.
Mhm.
Okay.
Officer, would you mind putting your name in the record, please?
Deputy Daniel Byers.
Thank you
Last
very
name is Byars.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And she was not asked to present an ID of any kind?
She was asked to present identification. When asked to present identification, she stated, "I don't have my ID on me."
And then they said, okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Deputy.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I'm good. Thank you.
If there's no one else that wants to add any additional color to this at this point, I'll ask, is there a motion to close the public hearing? To close the administrative hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion, second, please vote. Administrative hearing is closed. Commissioner Levin, again, if you want to delve into
Yeah,
this
so
further.
this board in the past has done anywhere from warnings to 1, 2, 3 days on the first offense. Being this one also has a license permit issue, even though it's 72 hours, I am going to make a motion to go for 3 days of a suspension starting next Monday. And staff, Tom, is that enough time?
Yes, that's enough time.
Starting next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for the 3 days.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
Excuse me, Commissioner Levin, is it 3 consecutive days, correct?
3 consecutive days, Monday,
making
Tuesday,
sure.
Wednesday.
All right, we do have a motion and a second. Please vote. All right, you understand what he's ordering you to coordinate with?
And Mr. Patel, should you not sell your business, that is fairly lenient the first time, we're not so much a second, and the third could be absolute revocation of the license at that location for 5 years. I'm going to, one more time.
It's progressive
Typically, we're
discipline.
very lenient on the first one, like you just saw.
Right.
If you come in front of us again, it won't be so lenient. And the third time, you may find yourself with a revocation where you will not have a license at that location for 5 years, at that address. So if you go to sell your location,
They can't do it either.
they can't, 5 years is gone.
Oh.
It will really hurt the value of your business. Please, don't
Sure.
come back in front of us again.
No, we'll.
Thank
won't
you.
do that. We'll take care of this part.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor, Is there a need for executive session this evening?
Madam Chair, there is not.
Oh, well then, is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and public hearings?
So moved.
Second.
We have several motions in several
Clear the board.
seconds. Please
Clear the
vote.
board. Clear the board.
We're all
Rhonda.
in.
Rhonda.
Celebrate,
And we stand
celebrate.
adjourned at 8:38
Rhonda, clear the
p.m.
board.
Clear.
This is TV Forsyth, your county connection.